Fall of Yami. On a deserted construction site overseeing Tokyo Bay the next day after Pan's declaration of facing Yami, Pan was standing pretty carefree with her followers lined on her sides. In front of her the entire leadership of Yami was staring at her with dark grim expressions on their faces, their disciples standing at the sides of their masters, some of them dreading the idea of having to fight against someone so ridiculously powerful like Pan. "Ah, I see you all got my invitation. Good. I assume you all know why I called you in here. Yes, you wish us to leave the Shinpaku Alliance alone and cease our operations in Japan by removing all our assets out of the country. Surely you don't expect us to agree to your terms just like that." The leader of the organization, a good-looking blonde man, said in a smooth tone. Pan looked at him with an eyebrow raised in amusement. "And who might you be?" "I am Saiga Furunji, the one shadow of the Nine Fists and leader of Yami." Saiga said, offering a bow. "Mu's father," Pan mumbled to herself, feeling something was off. "No, he's not, Giru." Giru interrupted. "Pan, don't be deceived by him, Giru. Whoever that man is, my scanners have detected he is wearing a disguise to look like Mu's father, Giru." The little robot warned, chirping in his metallic voice. Pan's reaction to that revelation was to send a thin ray of energy from her fingertip towards Saiga. The ray grazed his cheek before moving on its way and exploding several yards behind the gathered members of Yami and Yomi with the strength of a fighter jet's missile. A delicate thin line began to bleed on Saiga's cheek. "If you all value your lives, you'll do well to not try to deceive me. Now, I'll ask again. Who are you?" Pan said in a warning tone. Seeing his gig was up, Saiga brought a hand to his face to remove the disguise, revealing a different good-looking man with dark hair. "My name is Senzui, the real leader of Yami." "Why the disguise? Why pretend to be Mu's father?" she asked in the same tone that promised death if she didn't get a satisfactory answer. "I did it to put the blame of my actions and murders I committed over Saiga and break his resolution by having him lose all he held dear and make everyone he knew to turn their backs to him," he confessed, seeing that nothing less but the truth would mean instant death at Pan's hands. "So, when Mu told me that her father had murdered her mother, that was not true, it was you all along. You killed her mother and made everyone believe his father had done it," Pan said, figuring out the truth, a look of disgust forming on her face. "Yes, that was my handiwork. I killed Shizuha Furinji in front of her daughter and made everyone believe her husband Saiga had done it. I was even successful in fooling his own father, Hayato, and his daughter Mu. They never suspected anything," Senzui declared, showing pride over his actions. Kanto region. On an abandoned lot, the invading forces of the Shinpaku Alliance and the collective defenders from the Kanto schools had agreed to a temporary ceasefire when they had received the news that Pan had finally made her move against Yami and was uploading it online. Even the TV news were showing the live feeds on their channels. Many of the fighters and students were watching the live stream through their cell phones or portable laptops. Someone went as far as to bring a projector and connected it to its laptop, displaying the live feed on the side of a building. When seeing Senzui's confession of his crime, Mu fell to her knees in tears and began to cry, drawing the attention of her friends and the people around her. "Mother, father, Mu," Kenichi said, distressing over her, "the girl he has feelings for." He was about to try to comfort her when a blonde girl from the schools of Kanto, wearing a red plaid skirt and a yellow sweater, crouched in front of Mu and put her arms around her in a hug. "Hey, don't cry. It'll be all right," Hakufu Sansaku said, trying to reassure the girl she was previously fighting against, as her kind nature wouldn't allow her to ignore the pain of others. "That Pan girl will punish the mean man, you'll see. He will pay for what he has done," she said, trying to soothe her fellow blonde. Back to the construction site in Tokyo Bay, Pan was now openly frowning in disgust. "Say what you want about my race. The hands of my ancestors are stained with the blood of the countless of species they exterminated, but we never have tried to hide what we have done. We all have taken the responsibility of our actions. To shirk away and hide from the consequences of our own deeds is a sign of weakness. It tells me you feared to face them yourself. That you were not strong enough to shoulder that weight. Your weakness disgusts me. A weakling like you is not worthy to even speak in my direction, much less have the right to face me in combat." Pan turned away from Senzui to address the rest of Yami, ignoring him and not looking at him anymore, telling to all that he was not worthy of her attention. Her action left most of her audience shocked, and Senzui was left seething in anger at such humiliation. "Don't think I'm not done with you yet. Once I finish my business with your friends, I'll make sure to take care of you," Pan stated, without looking at Senzui. "So, what about the rest of you? Do you all also wish to decline my offer and face me and my forces?" she asked, looking at the rest of Yami. "Of course, we just can't simply back down without a fight. That is not the way how we do things," Ogata Ishinsai said with a sway. "Oh, why is that?" Pan replied, curious. "You do know you're all heavily outclassed against me. After all, I single-handedly destroyed most of the more powerful criminal organizations in the world that could rival your own, like Shadaloo and Nests. Even your archenemies from the Ryazanpaku dojo all fell against me in a single swoop. I don't know why you wish to refuse my offer. I believe I'm being pretty generous if I say so myself. I'm giving you the chance to stay out of my way without much trouble, or do you think you can succeed where many others as strong as you have failed?" she asked with a cold smile. Cyril Ramon joined his hands in a classical meditative position and offered about a Pan's answer. "We really appreciate that you had the courtesy to call us in advance for this meeting. We do not wish to imply that we sneer at your offer. But as grandmasters of our styles, our pride and honor as martial artists does not allow us to back down from any challenge sent on our way. Even if it is a hopeless battle with all the odds stacked against us, I actually found our current situation refreshing, and I'm pretty excited of facing you in battle. This is the first time I can honestly say I'm completely outmatched. It will be an interesting experience to fight someone much stronger than me," the elder man said, beaming a smile. "That is right. To back off now would be to betray the principles on which we have decided to live our lives. I don't mind having to risk and lose my own life in battle against you, for that is the path I have chosen. To live by the art and to die by the art," Agard Jumsai said with an unfaltering confidence. Pan mused over Cyril's and Agard's words. "Honor, that word holds a different meaning to Saiyans than what it does to you humans. Tell me, what kind of honor do you think it has? Someone of a race that has destroyed worlds, that has killed countless men, women and children, razed entire cities in a blink of an eye with only a wave of the hand, eradicated entire species with a single strike and rendered entire planets completely lifeless, all in the name of profit. You should be careful when using that word around my kind. But pride I can understand. Our entire society is built upon that word, is the foundation in which all Saiyans lead their lives. Pride. Our pride is a race, our pride is warriors, our pride in our strength, in ourselves. We are raised and taught with the knowledge that it should be the only thing that needs to matter to us as individuals. So yes, I understand your words and can even respect the fact you wish to accept no surrender and face me, despite the enormous difference in strength between us." Pan smirked. "It makes things more entertaining." "That is right, Señorita." Diego Carlo, the big-muscled luchador, said boisterously. "It would be a shame to not carry on with the show when there's an audience that needs to be entertained," he said with overly dramatic poses and hand motions. "What audience? What are you talking about?" Foxy asked, estranged by the Latin American luchador mannerisms. The grinning Diego Carlo pointed at Giru. "The audience that is watching us thanks to our little friend over there, of course. He's recording us all and uploading our meeting on the internet on a live feed, is it not?" "Yes," Pan answered with a nod. "So there you have it. All the people of the world are bearing witness of this moment. The stage is set, the audience is waiting, let us put up a show worthy to remember," Diego Carlos said, pumping an arm. Pan couldn't help but smirk and pointed a finger towards the smiling luchador. "I like your attitude. You're right, we should make things interesting." Ethan Stanley gulped in dread. "Are we sure? Is it a good idea to face her if we really don't have to? She's strong enough to erase whole cities from the map if she feels like it. Even if we all were to attack her, I don't think we could last more than a few minutes," he said in a pretty nervous tone. He received a punch to the back of his head from his sister, Rachel Stanley, as response. "That is not the point, brother. Don't you see we have a responsibility as premier entertainers to put up a good show for the audience enjoyment? I mean, not many have this opportunity to fight against such a strong opponent with the whole world watching on. This is the moment we have been waiting for, our time to shine and show the world our skills. Isn't it this for what we have been training for all this time with our masters? For a chance to show the fruits of our labors. The blonde girl said passionately. You know, I really don't think we are going to have the opportunity to shine as you said so, my dear sister, not against an opponent as strong as Pan. Said unconvinced. Her sister was about to hit him again when they were suddenly interrupted. Well, tell you what. Pan said, calling back the attention to her once more. If you are worried that this fight will not last long to make it enjoyable, I'm willing to take you by your word and give you all the chance to shine, since I'm feeling in a good mood right now, and seeing as to how you all are too weak to face me, I'm going to make you all work for the right to challenge me in combat. She said, looking over at Diego, Carlo and Rachel. And also because I'm in a somewhat similar situation to you, since I too had promised my minions to give them a chance to play. So how about this? I'll let each and every single one of you to fight against one of my minions. You can choose whoever you want to face. I will not interfere with your fights in any way. If you defeat your opponents, I'll let you decide whether you wish to walk away from here with your lives. If you chose this option, I'll make sure to not bother you ever again. Or if you prefer, you could choose to face me in combat, since you would have earned the right to do so. But if you lose, whether against my minions or against me, and somehow you're still alive, then you'll have to join my alliance as your friend Sai did. She said, pointing behind her towards the tall lanky man clad in black. A small frown marred the otherwise impassive face of Mikumo Kushinada when hearing that last condition. We are not friends of traitors that turn their backs on our ideals. I should just kill him where he stands for his betrayal. The tall black-clad man began to wail comically. Nio, Mike-chan, why do you say those mean things to me? I thought we were friends. He then stopped his tantrum stone cold and made a 360 in his behavior, turning stoic and composed. That is what I would say if I cared about what you have to say, which I don't. For a moment, the whole world joined together and united in a collective sweat drop at the goth man antics. Kushinada just kept her expression of mild disdain. Friends. Why you had to bring up such a useless word. True warriors do not need such petty attachments. The strong should not let their hearts be shaken by the weak. She turned towards Pan. I find your conditions insulting. We will not, we accept. Diego Carlos said merrily, interrupting Kushinada, his smiling disciple nodding vigorously at his side. Kushinada just remained silent, but one could tell she was simmering on the inside. You do not have any objections as your friend here? Pan inquired, turning back towards the luchador. None at all, replied the smiling luchador happily. It is only proper for the loser to obey the winner, as he would have proven himself to be the stronger man. He stated in his usual flamboyant attitude. Pan tilted her head and gave a curious look at the luchador, as if he had said something that had given him a favorable standing in her eyes. Well, you are certain quite the reasonable fellow, and here I thought you all would be a bunch of heartless killers according to the descriptions I've heard about you lot. This surely proves not to put much stock over rumors, she trailed off mumbling to herself. Anyway, what about the rest of you, do you accept my challenge? Sure, why not? It could be interesting. I yearn for a good fight. Ogata said, popping his neck. I too accept those conditions. Agard Jumsai said without hesitation. I too accept, Akira Hongo said, speaking for the first time in his stoic demeanor. I accept too, Cyril Rahman agreed with a nod. I don't care about any conditions, I just came here to fight. Shouldn't we get on with what we came to do here instead of wasting time talking? I wanna fight, damn it. Berserker said, already impatient. Took the words out of my mouth, Blondie. K. 9999 said in agreement, a deranged smile on his face. Berserker locked eyes with him and replied with a scary smile of his own. Both young men suddenly engaged in a battle of wills, itching to begin with the violence. One by one the members of Yami, from both unarmed and armed divisions, accepted Pan's challenge alongside their disciples. Kushinada had no option but to agree with the unanimous decision. Very well, if this is the will of the group, let us allow our disciples to go first. I'm sure they are more than capable in dealing with these brats. she said derisively, looking towards Pan and her followers. They didn't take kindly the insult. Do what you think best, but me and my disciple will go first together. No question on that, Diego Carlo stated, him and Rachel stepping forward. Cushionata again remained impassive at Diego Carlo bluntness. Suit yourself, but know that if you fail Yami again, you and your disciple will not be able to escape from my punishment a second time. Diego Carlo ignored Cushionata's words and kept walking until standing in the middle of space between Yami and Pan's group with his disciple. So you want to go first, and in a tag team battle with your disciple on top of that? Any particular reason why? Pan asked, mildly intrigued. That's right. I wish to fight alongside my disciple once more. I've spent the last months serving my sentence inside Big Lock alongside Alexander, worrying about my dear little Rachel, thinking how much she must have missed me. Diego Carlo began to explain, again performing ridiculous poses to describe his feelings, even going as far as unleashing the waterworks. But while inside the prison I received the news of the alien girl from another world that turned out to be as strong as Superman, my excitement began to grow, as I wished to fight such strong opponent. When I heard you wanted to meet with the heads of Yami, I knew I had to be present. So me and Alexander escaped from Big Lock that same day and came all the way here. Now that I'm reunited with my disciple once more, I know I can face anything you throw at me with a smile. He said, giving a nice guy pose with a thumb up. Oh master, I did miss you while you were away. But now that you have returned, we can be tag partners again and fight as a team like old times. Rachel said with her own jubilee. Wait a minute, Whip spoke, making her opinion known. Didn't Pan call this meeting only yesterday? You mean to tell us you escaped from prison and came all the way here in a single day? She remarked with some disbelief. That's kinda impressive, whatever, Pan said, moving on. Very well, I'll accept your wish for a tag team fight. Any other thing I should know about? She asked, with mild indifference. Well, only if I could choose the conditions of the arena in which this fight is going to be held. Diego Carlo mentioned a bit coyly. Pan mused over that for a moment. Sure, why not? But you'll have to take care of that yourself. Don't expect us to give you a hand over something you want to get done. Diego Carlo was beaming again. No problem. I have everything I need already, he said before turning around and screaming towards the interior of the incomplete building in construction. Hey, bring the ring over here. At his order, a quartet of people, all of them being not the most pleasing to the eyes, a big overweight woman, a slightly chubby middle-aged man, a skeletal thin young man, and a midget, all of them wearing wrestling masks and tights, came into view carrying a wrestling ring and set it right beside where Diego Carlo was standing. To say that the people witnessing this peculiarity were left stumped was coming up short in words. The fuck? Where did you pull that thing out? Yuri asked, mind-boggled at what she was witnessing. I brought it with me just for this special occasion, the overbearing luchador replied. Most of the people gathered in the construction site could just not simply wrap over their heads. How and where did the big muscled luchador had the time to secure a wrestling ring? The sweat drops were so strong. Cushionata's eyebrow was twitching like crazy. Whip spoke again. You mean to tell us that you did not only escaped from the Big Lock prison yesterday and came all the way here, but you also went out of your way to secure a wrestling ring and bring it with you? Yes, the eyebrows twitches were strong. Of course, I'm always prepared for any occasion, Diego Carlo replied, unnaturally happy before climbing atop of the ring, passing underneath the ropes with a slide. So, who will have the courage to come in here and face me on this ring? He asked, standing in the middle of the square. Quote. Pan stayed quiet too for a few minutes, until she grudgingly admitted. And all that without the use of dynacaps. Okay, that's actually impressive, but anyway, let's just keep moving on and ignore this for the sake of our mental health. So, she turned towards her followers. So which one of you would like to go up there and fight him? HMMMPH, Balrog, how about you? You used to be a prize fighter, don't you? You should know how to fight atop a ring, she said, addressing the big former boxer. It's been a while since I've stepped into a ring, but yeah, I still remember some of my moves. HMMMPH, alright, I'll take care of that chump, it'll be nice to fight on a ring again. The black boxer said, hitting his gloved fists together before walking towards the ring. Very well, you still need a partner though, Pan mentioned and turned to the rest of her minions. Does anyone else know how to fight on a ring too? None of the others replied to that. Sagat could have stepped forward since he has fought in rings before during his Muay Thai career, but he didn't want to fight against that masked weirdo. It was Vega who raised his hand after a long sigh. I know how, I've fought in many rings and cages back in Spain. I know how to unfurl myself well on top of a ring. Pan nodded at that. Okay, then you can be Balrog's partner for this fight. Quite appropriate since you two have worked together for a long time. Vega refrained from mentioning how much he despised the times when he had to partner up with the ugly oaf during his time in Shadaloo. The Spaniard Matador just limited himself to move towards the ring without another word, but once he walked over his companion, he couldn't avoid from hiding his sneer. Even now that I'm under orders of a new boss, I just can't seem to get rid of you and your ugly mug. How dreadful this luck of mine. Quiet, pretty boy, I'm not too thrilled of having to work with you again. So save your comments and let's just end with this quickly before I decide to rearrange your face. Balrog barked back, he too displeased by the notion of having to partner up with Vega again. As if you had the skills or the brains to defeat me, you illiterate brute. Vega mocked, passing a hand through his long mane of hair in a dismissal gesture. Shut the hell up already, you damn metrosexual. I don't want to hear it. Okay, I'll go first. You stay here and wait for my signal for when I need to switch places with you. Balrog said, before proceeding to climb over the ring. Whatever. Just make sure not to mess this up for us due to your lack of grace. Vega told him off, before focusing on preening his face using the reflection of his mask as a mirror. How I hate you, Balrog grumbled as he passed over the ropes. He then went towards Diego Carlo until he was face to face with the luchador. Ah, so you're going to be the brave soul that will dare to challenge me. I salute you, Senor, for your bravery. A thought passed over the usual carefree mind of Angel. Wait a minute, doesn't this kind of fights need a referee? She asked out loud. She was pretty certain about that. After all, she is Mexican and all Mexicans know their lucha libre. Diego Carlo acknowledged her comment. Ah yes, it's true. I almost forgot through all my excitement. No need to worry though, I have the perfect candidate to serve as referee. He stated in his usual flamboyant manner. Really? Whip said, dubious, a little apprehensive of what the mad masked man had still in store. Indeed, behold, bring forth the referee. He signaled to his aides. And almost immediately, a body was thrown inside the ring. It was a bound and gagged white Caucasian man, on his early 60s, bald and wearing a referee outfit. The midget dressed as a luchador proceeded to remove his gag. Let me free, you goddamn midget, before I kick your ass. The man said, obviously pissed off. For a moment, the people witnessing the proceedings simply sweat dropped at the ridiculous scene, until Mature pointed out. Wait a minute, isn't that the referee that appears on TV presiding over the heavyweight championship boxing matches? What was his name? Mills Lane, the one with the show where he presides over as a judge. Iori mentions, turning towards Mature. The one who acted as referee over the infamous bite fight. Yeah, it's him, Yuri said, confirming their suspicions. What the fuck, was all that a mind-numbed Whip could say. Yo, Mills, what are you doing in here? K9999 called at him. This damn midget here kidnapped me from my bed this morning, dressed me inside my old referee suit and dragged me in here against my will. Mills Lane replied in angry outrage before kicking said midget out of the ring. Get away from me, you damn midget. Indeed, I sent my little assistant to secure a proper referee for our fight while I was busy with the rest of the preparations. Diego Carlos said with his usual unflinching smile. You're the one that sent that midget against me. I should beat the crap out of you for that, said the irate referee. Please, calm down, Senor Lane. I apologize if my little friend didn't treat you in the way a man of your stature deserves to. I only wanted to bring you here for us to have a proper figure of authority to preside over our fights. Diego Carlos said, trying to appease the senior referee. While Mills Lane began a shouting match with Diego Carlo, The rest of the fighters witnessing this event and the people watching throughout the world were openly gaping at the extreme weirdness happening in front of their eyes. Many from the Yami ranks were face-palming at the sheer stupidity displayed by their companion. Kushinada's eye twitch came back with a vengeance, and it brought a friend with him. Michael Stilve just simply couldn't comprehend why someone would act like this. He turned towards Alexander Gaidar. Yo, Gaidar, you were locked up with Diego Carlo on prison for several months. Did he always acted like this? He asked in disbelief. The Russian Sambo Grandmaster just nodded. Yes, he was, too. Meanwhile inside the ring, Mills Lane finally reached a decision. All right, I'll preside over this fight as a referee, if it gets me back home sooner. Now, combatants. To the center of the, hold it. Pan called, raising her open palm up to stop everything. What is it? Mills Lane asked a little vexed. I just realized, I don't have enough cameras to record this fight. Pan mentioned in thought. I want to be able to catch everything from several different angles. Giru, go and deploy a batch of our flying cameras. She ordered, turning towards her robotic companion. Right away Pan, Giru. I'll need to consume some metal in order to replicate enough cameras first, Giru. Replied the tiny robot. Then get to it. Pan replied in a no-nonsense tone. On it, Giru. The diminutive robot rushed quickly throughout the field, drawing the attention of most of the gathered fighters who followed his movements with their eyes. Giru finally stopped in front of a big heavy-duty bulldozer, making the people watching him wonder what the hell he was up to. What the hell is that tiny bucket of bolts going to do? Mills Lane said a little restless for the delay. This is perfect, Giru. Giru said, before putting his tiny arms over the front of the enormous bulldozer, and lifting the entire thing over his head. Freaking out everybody who was watching, he began to crush and compact the size of the heavy machinery. His body then opened at the middle, like some kind of Pac-Man mouth, and he began to chomp on the big bar of metal that was the compressed bulldozer, slowly eating bite by bite the whole vehicle. To say that all the people watching such bizarre show were flabbergasted was like saying the center of the sun was only slightly warm. In the end, Giru was left chomping on a tire, the once big and impressive machinery having been consumed completely by him. But the show didn't end there. After having eaten the whole enormous construction vehicle, Giru began to spit out a swarm of small robots that looked kinda like him. They were pretty little, only a tenth of Giru's size. They had his same round body but had no arms or legs, but they moved by floating around their place. Another difference that these mini Girus had was that the optic sensor was replaced by a camera lens. The little Giru cameras began to spread around the place, all the way chirping the name of their progenitor in their high-pitched tiny robot voices. Giru, 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 Giru. All done Pan, Giru. Giru said before returning to his owner's side. Okay, you can proceed now. Oh, by the way, you two should take off your turtle shells, as you only began with my style of training a couple of days, so it is not enough time for you to have get used to the extra weight. Better get rid of them for this battle, otherwise it will only hinder your movements. Pan said. Her two minions did as instructed and put their shells down over a corner. She then signaled the referee to begin. Damn, that tiny robot is quite the frigging monster. Mills Lane commented after witnessing Giru's feat. All right, combatants, to the center of the ring. He called. Well, if it isn't Balrog, we see each other again it seems. Mills Lane said with a little sarcasm after taking notice of the former prize fighter. Hi Mills, it's been a while, Balrog replied a little hesitant. You two know each other? Diego Carlo asks curious. Of course, I presided over many of the fights of this cheating bastard, in fact. It was after I disqualified him in a match for the World Heavyweight Championship after I had enough of his headbutts, that his boxing license was revoked. I'm going to be keeping my eye on you, Mills said looking at Balrog intently. Ah, come on Mills, cut me some slack. Damn, it feels just like my boxing days when I had you watching over my shoulder like a hawk all over again. Balrog said dejected. And I will make damn sure to keep doing that. Mills turned towards Diego Carlo. You better keep your eyes peeled on this one, for he may well try to hit you with a foul when you least expect it. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for your warning. Opera, Diego Carlo. Thanks were interrupted by the senior referee. Save your breath, I don't give a rat ass about your thanks. I'm still pissed at you for sending that midget against me, Mills Lane said pointedly. He came back to address everyone in general. So people, how are we going to play this out? What kind of match are we going to have in here? Well, this will be mostly a lucha libre team tag match, though our friend here is clearly a boxer, so we may have to apply some rules from that sport to give him some leverage. I'll leave that to your discretion, referee. However, this fight will not stop until one of the teams is unable to continue, so there will be no pin count to be held. Diego Carlo said gracefully. Lucha libre. That's Mexican wrestling. Alright, I think I got it. He clapped his hands together. Okay people, let's get this done. I want a good clean fight. No punches under the waistline, no cheap shots. Mills was eyeing Balrog on this one. No spitting, eye pokes or other kind of unsportsmanship behavior. Alright, are you both ready? He asked, turning to both combatants, who gave him a nod each. Then, let's get it on, he said, pumping his fist before moving away from the combatants. Fall of Yami Round 1. Balrog Diego Carlo vs Vega Rachel Stanley. Diego Carlo immediately pulled out his happy mask and changed it for his angry mask in a single move. Let's us begin with the show, senor. Shut up and fight, punk. Balrog barked before throwing a punch to Diego Carlo's smiling face. The luchador easily avoided the hit by bending his body backwards. He used his hands to support himself in the mat and grabbed Balrog by the neck with his legs before in a single movement lifting him up while spinning in a 180 arc and slamming him in the ground head first with an impact that rattled the entire ring. Diego Stick Steiner. Balrog was left dazed after that impact that shook his entire skull. Diego Carlo took the opportunity to quickly climb atop the nearest turnbuckle and jumped from the top of it with a backflip. He then body slammed the still downed Balrog with the full weight of his body. Diego Tika body. Balrog was still unresponsive after that last impact, so Diego Carlo grabbed him on a hold from behind, lifted him up and performed a German suplex, continuing to punish his head. He then turned around white out, losing his hold on Balrog, and performed a second German suplex and then a third one. Diego Carlo was taking position to perform a fourth one, when Balrog finally reacted by elbowing him in the face. The punch caught the luchador off guard and made him lose his hold on the boxer. Balrog angrily lunged at Diego Carlo and grabbed him by the head to deliver a violent headbutt that left the luchador off balance. He then stomped harshly upon Diego Carlo's foot, distracting the luchador, before delivering a powerful elbow strike to his face after whipping a cross punch. Dirty Bull. Whip was calling for the referee after seeing Balrog's attack. Hey, aren't those 3 moves forbidden in boxing? Yes they are, Mills Lane said, getting between the two combatants. Alright, you two, break it up. You, go back to your corner, he ordered to Diego Carlo, who complied. Now you, he turned to Balrog with an accusing finger. What did I do? Balrog complained, faking ignorance. You know damn well what you did, Mills Lane remarked. Headbutts and foot stomping are forbidden in boxing, but they are allowed in lucha libre, so I will not be calling those. However, the last one was indeed a foul move, but since I'm still pissed at that masked idiot for having sent that midget against me, I'll let it slide just this once. But you better keep it down with the cheap shots if you don't want me to kick you out of this ring, but feel free to go crazy with the headbutts if you want. Thanks Mills, you're not so bad after all, Balrog commented, happy with the decision. Alright you two, back to the fight, Mills Lane called before clearing away. Now you'll see senor, I'll make sure to repay you for that last move, Diego Carlo said, before using his great strength to jump high in the air before diving towards Balrog in an aerial attack. Balrog simply looked at him with his guard up, before jumping after Diego Carlo and intercepted him midair with a headbutt right in his abdomen. Buffalo headbutt. Diego Carlo managed to land of his feet, but he had his breath taken after that last hit. Balrog took the chance to pummel him with a devastating combination of punches. 2 left straights followed by 1 right hook and ended with a spin and a quick rush to deliver a devastating uppercut that broke through the air and made it whistle around Balrog's fist. The blow connected and left Diego Carlo reeling on his feet. Dash upper. Balrog continued with his onslaught. He landed 3 consecutive low straights on the luchador's abdomen, followed by a jab to the face and ended with another spin and quick rush to deliver a devastating straight. Dash straight. Balrog was about to deliver another straight, when Diego Carlo ducked underneath his punch and hooked his arm underneath Balrog's own and behind his armpit, and then quickly lifted the boxer with that same arm and tossed him forward on a successful hip toss that made Balrog land on his back several feet away from Diego Carlo. Ouch! Diego Carlo was smiling as he used his thumb to clean a stain of blood on the corner of his mouth from one of Balrog's previous punches. Well, senor, I must say it is nice to know that you really know how to fight. Guess I'll have to take you seriously from now on, he said before rushing towards Balrog. The boxer was about to receive him with a punch, but Diego Carlo suddenly split into several copies or clones that began to circle around the African-American man at high speeds, confusing the boxer greatly. Diego Bunchin. On the ground, the fighters following Pan were commenting on that last technique. Is he really making clones, like the ninjas in the mangas? Diana asked in surprise, seeing a technique out of a ridiculous fiction story in real life. Pan bristled at that. Of course not, he's just using a variation of the afterimage technique that my grandfather learned when he was a kid. In layman terms, he's moving so fast that he leaves afterimages behind him. They may appear real, but they have no mass or weight behind them, though. They're just an illusion performed to trick the eye. 3. Thega, even from a distance, managed to catch Pan's words and acquired a thoughtful look as he mulled upon them. Back in the ring, Balrog was having trouble in hitting Diego Carlo, as every time he tried to hit one of the running luchadores circling around him, they dissipated, revealing to be only a copy. Stop running, goddammit. Stay still so I can hit you, the African-American boxer said in frustration. The real Diego Carlo finally decided to stop running and reappeared right behind the boxer's back, who was unaware of him. He extended his arms wide before suddenly crossing them around Balrog's neck and striking with a guillotine move that resonated through the entire place and left the boxer wobbling on his feet. Diego Tick Cross Guillotine. BLERGH. Disoriented by the attack, Balrog could only take a few steps before almost falling down on the canvas if it wasn't because he had unwittingly walked into a corner and managed to take hold of the turnbuckle to support himself. Having no place to evade or move after being hurt badly by the guillotine, Balrog could do nothing but play on the defensive. He closed himself in a classic turtle defense just in time as Diego Carlo tried to capitalize on his disorientation by running at him and trying to deliver a spinning heel kick. Balrog was able to successfully block the attack despite the strength behind it shaking the entire ring up. Diego Carlo then tried to break Balrog's defense using an overhead chop, followed by a barrage of several elbow smashes and even a bellclap, but the boxer's defense was practically impenetrable and he managed to block every single strike with his arms despite each having the power to make the entire place tremble. Diego Carlo had to admit that the defense of the former prize boxer was impressive. He tried to break Balrog's defenses again with another barrage of strikes, taking advantage from having pushed the boxer into a corner. His attack kept going for several minutes, each punch being blocked, echoing loudly throughout the place. One could see with the naked eye how the air was being displaced by the resulting shockwave from each strike. Diego Carlo had probably launched several hundred of them with his speed, but none managed to break through the formidable defense of Balrog. He took all that punishment like a champ. Those watching the fight were starting to get pretty excited by the great skill being displayed. Balrog, you're doing great. Just hold on a little longer. You can do it. Come on. Get out of that corner already. What are you waiting for? Kill that bastard already. In Kanto, the gathered students were also pretty thrilled by the battle running out. My god, I wish I could have a defense like that. Takeda the puncher said, awed by Balrog's defensive skills. His master, James Shiba, put a hand over his shoulder. Well then, kiddo, that means we're gonna have to step up your training after we get back. Back on the fight, Diego Carlo was beginning to feel frustrated at his lack of progress. Even if he possessed an enormous stamina that can allow him to throw punches for hours, that would be of little use if his opponent is also able to take all those hits without losing his breath. Having enough of this impasse, Diego Carlo used his impressive speed to quickly run to the opposite corner and bounce from the turnbuckle to then lunge back at Balrog with a lariat, intending to crush him with the entire weight of his body. Balrog made no move as Diego Carlo flied at him like a bullet, but just when the attack was about to connect, Buffalo headbutt. Balrog launched another one of his infamous headbutts that struck right underneath Diego Carlo's chin and stopped the luchador cold on his tracks. "Now, I've got you," Balrog exclaimed with a smirk. As soon as both combatants' feet touched the ground again, Balrog grabbed Diego Carlo from his shoulder and began to deliver a series of devastating headbutts that began to leave the luchador reeling on his feet. Balrog turned on his spot, switching positions with the luchador before delivering a nasty hook to the face. Balrog then performed a quick 2 straights jab combo before delivering another of his dash attacks, a sucker punch to the stomach that made Diego Carlo topple over the turnbuckle. Dash low smash. Now you die. Now that the tables had turned, Balrog began to deliver a powerful barrage of left and right hooks into the body of the luchador, as a reenactment of the punishment that the luchador had brought upon him just previously, except his own attacks were actually connecting and were visibly causing a dent in Diego Carlo's physique. The audience was getting wild by that comeback as the thunderclap of each hit resonated upon the place. Yes, kill him. Hit him with the left. Punish him. Diego Carlo snapped out of his daze and tried to put an end to the pain by lashing out at Balrog, but the boxer turned his back at him and ducked under the attack as he began to charge a powerful strike of his own. Gigaton blow. Balrog yelled. The senses of those present suddenly flared as they felt the energy of Balrog rising. Time felt like freezing and the former prize fighter performed 2 quick spins in his place and launched a devastating straight at Diego Carlo that rammed on him in full without stopping and kept pushing forward as if trying to run him through. The move actually hurt Diego Carlo, who let out a wad of spit and almost toppled over as result. "Master!" Rachel Stanley yelled in distress and ran immediately towards the corner. Balrog's single punch was able to deliver 9 successive hits, one after the other, and ended launching Diego Carlo violently back on the turnbuckle, threatening to almost bend and rip the thing out. Diego Carlo would had already fallen into the canvas if he hadn't wrapped his arms around the turnbuckle. His student, already reaching his side from outside the ring, asked if he was okay. He just raised his hand and gave her the switching tap while Balrog was still in his punching pose. "Now you die," Balrog said with a smirk, bringing his arm back and thinking in the most appropriate way to deliver the killing blow. "I don't think so. You leave my master alone," a voice said from above. Balrog looked up to see Rachel Stanley jumping from atop the turnbuckle, passing above her master's head and dropping down on him with bog legs forward on a drop kick. Caster drop kick. The attack connected and the soles of both Rachel's boots impacted heavily in Balrog's face and drove him violently into the mat. Diego Carlo took the chance to move outside the ring and rest. Rachel performed a backflip to gain some distance and launched herself into the ropes to gain some momentum before flinging herself at Balrog with a lariat, arms crossed in front of her, while the former prized fighter rose back to his feet. Balrog managed to take notice of Rachel's attack and managed to assume a defensive stance just as the young luchadora crashed on him with her lariat. The clash between the two thundered across the whole construction site. Rachel had thought she had nailed the boxer square with her lariat, but was surprised to know that he had blocked her attack and didn't even manage to move him a single inch. "What? Get away from me, brat!" Balrog raged before grabbing Rachel and savagely threw her into a corner, where she slammed violently with the turnbuckle being embedded into the small of her back. Owie! Balrog had enough for now, so he moved towards the edge of his side of the ring. "Hey Vega, come in here and deal with this brat. I need a timeout," he said as he gave the tap to Vega that signaled the switch in partners. "HMMPH, might as well. A Neanderthal like you could never hope to know how to treat a beautiful lady," Vega commented as he put his mask on. "Just get in here, pretty boy." Vega began to get inside the ring, but the Spanish matador was stopped by Mills Lane as he tried to move between the ropes. "Hold it right there, Antonio Banderas. I don't want any weapon inside my ring. Take those nails of yours out or I will not let you enter on this fight. This is a fighting ring, goddammit." Not a manicure boutique, he said, getting in Vega's way. It's okay, Mr. Lane, I don't mind if he's armed. I've been trained to fight against armed opponents and faced many of them before. Rachel said, trying to assuage the senior referee. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I can't in good conscience let you fight against an opponent armed with a deadly weapon, as that not only gives him an unfair advantage and goes against the rules of both sports, but also because it endangers the life of one of the fighters. Mills Lane said, not willing to budge in the subject. I'm sorry to object, Referee Lane. Diego Carlo began to say from his position. But this is not an official match of either sport. We who are fighting in here, do so according to our own views about our arts. The group that I represent, Yami, believes in the way of the killing fist, which dictates that killing your opponents during a fight is the way martial arts should be used. It doesn't differentiate between armed or unarmed opponents. Both can engage in single combat until only one is left standing. So I exhort you to allow this man to enter this fight and use his weapon if he so wishes. I'm pretty sure my disciple is more than able to deal with this issue. Your group believes that fights should be fought to the death. Man, aren't you and your buddies quite the friendly fellows? Mills Lane replied snidely. Do not worry, Senor Referee. Vega said with arrogant confidence. I never use my claws to bring harm upon beautiful flowers. Oh great, I feel so much better now. Mills Lane retorted with dripping sarcasm. Arg. Fine, suit yourselves. But let it be clear that I oppose this decision and will not be held responsible for any injury either of you might receive. He stated pointedly. We understand, Senor Referee, and thank you for your comprehension. Diego Carlo said with gratitude. Yeah, all right, Antonio Banderas, get your ass in here before I change my mind. The senior referee said, motioning for Vega to enter the ring, and the Spaniard Matador was finally able to join the fight. Rachel was waiting for him already from atop the turnbuckle. So you think you have the skills to challenge me? Let us see if you can keep up. Please try not to disappoint. Vega let out a chuckle, and with a backflip, landed atop the turnbuckle opposite to Rachel. So my pretty, shall we dance? Oh, I'll make sure to do more than just a simple dance, Rachel replied with a wicked smile, before jumping high into the air towards Vega. The masked assassin just kept waiting perched atop his turnbuckle, watching as how Rachel at the top her jump began to fall back down towards his direction in a spinning dropkick. Tornado dropkick. Still, despite the incoming danger, Vega didn't even flinch. He just stared at the imminent approaching attack for a moment, seemingly bored, before performing a backflip with his arms extended, that somehow moved him forward instead of backwards and connected with his feet being buried on Rachel's side, stopping her motion and taking her out of the air. Yo, Scarlet Terror. Rachel crashed into the ground but managed to roll back into a crouching position, one arm covering the side where Vega had kicked her. She was slightly frozen with shock. This was the first time someone interrupted one of her aerial attacks and knocked her down. So my dear, it seems I'm more than able to keep up with you as you had said. Vega said in a mocking tone. Despite the mask, one could clearly imagine his arrogant grin. His tone irritated Rachel to no end. It was just a lucky shot, that's all. It just caught me by surprise to see you're not so completely incompetent. Her eyes hardened. It will not happen again, she said before shooting back atop a turnbuckle and diving into the skies again with a flip. She looked down at the end of her spin to search for Vega, but was again surprised to find that instead of him being down in the ring, he was right in front of her, face up in the air, upside down and curled into a little ball with his arms circling his knees, spinning towards her. She could only display an expression of shock before Vega crashed upon her, grabbed her by the waist, spun her around until she was upside down and then plummeted her to the mat in a freefall headfirst with Vega still holding her from behind. Yow www. Izuna drop. Normally Rachel would have been able to break through any grip and hold placed upon her, as her great flexibility always allowed her to. But the impression made by discovering that there's someone that can effectively counteract her in the air, added with the brief disorientation resulting from being spun around and the fact she could not find any kind of appropriate support while falling, left her totally helpless and unable to avoid from crashing into the canvas with her skull. Thump. Vega immediately let her go after she landed and fell back into the mat feet first with a flip. The injured girl could just roll over and sprawl herself on the canvas in pain. She tried to turn around and looked at Vega with an expression of total shock and disbelief. How? Outside of the ring, Pan commented about the fight. It seems she has finally realized just in how much trouble she's at. She said impassively. Sagat nodded from behind her. I'm not surprised. Vega has always excelled in aerial combat. This luchadores may have some impressive aerial offensive techniques, but against someone like Vega, those abilities are just a weakness. Pan just acknowledged his statement with a nod and kept her attention solely on the fight. Rachel finally managed to stand back up. She now was facing Vega with utmost seriousness. Seeing how he is able to efficiently counter her in the air, she guessed the best option would be to engage him in the ground. Rachel Bushin, she exclaimed before dividing into almost a dozen copies of herself that began to sweep around Vega at great speed. Rachel believed that by confusing his senses she could land a surprise attack. But Vega was not an enemy that could be easily fooled, for he was well versed in the art of ninjutsu, an art that relies heavily on distraction and deception. He was not called the Spanish ninja for nothing after all. Remembering Pan's words about how this technique was nothing more than an optical illusion, he crouched on his spot and took a defensive stance. He then closed his eyes and tried instead to pinpoint Rachel's location by using his other senses. What's the matter? Am I being too fast for you? Rachel mocked as she increased her speed and that of her clones. Vega did not pay attention to her attempts to goad him and continued to listen attentively to his surroundings. Finally, after a few seconds, he found what he was searching for. Thump! Vega shot himself forward. Just as a fist embedded itself on the spot where he was just recently at, he spun around in the air into a corner and bounced from the turnbuckle, gliding back at an astonished Rachel Stanley with his claws outstretched in front of him. Yo www. Sky High Claw. Rachel could only cross her arms in front of her just in time to block that attack and avoid being skewered by Vega's claws. The Spanish ninja immediately bounced away from her once his attack struck and assumed a fighting stance once he was back in the ground. The masters and disciples from Yami and Yomi watching the fight were actually impressed by Vega's performance. They began to label him as a dangerous opponent that should not be underestimated. Rachel didn't want to admit it, but she began to become afraid of the Spanish assassin. That's it, I've had enough of you. She screamed before rushing at Vega to throw him a punch. He easily blocked the simple attack of the blonde luchadora, whomp, and was surprised by the strength behind it. Well, it seems the pretty lady knows how to throw a hit. Los trucos sin nombre. Rachel began to launch a barrage of simple kicks and punches at high speed, putting all of her strength behind each attack. Vega blocked a couple more of those attacks, almost losing his footing due to the great power that each one of those strikes packed. He decided right there that a change of strategy was in order. After all, he hasn't defeated opponents bigger and stronger than him by fighting them on an equal setting. When the next attack from Rachel came at him, he easily avoided it with a series of backflips and put some distance between him and the enraged luchadora. Hey, come back in here and take your beating, Rachel yelled before going after him. She tried to keep pummeling at him with her barrage of simple kicks and punches, but every time she reached him and tried to do so, those basic attacks were easily evaded by Vega, who kept performing more backflips and continued to keep Rachel at a distance. The girl started to become increasingly frustrated with each attack she missed and every time she had to chase after Vega, who was doing nothing but keeping her at arm's length. I've had enough of you. Stay still and face me like a man, Rachel finally screamed, her patience finally running out. Vega finally decided to stop and stood still after covering almost half the ring with a single backflip. He waited for the girl to do her move while he crouched once more over the canvas. Rachel released a triumphal exclamation, once she saw her prey coming to a stop at last. Finally, I will crush you, take this, she yelled as she ran towards Vega with her arm pulled back to launch a devastating punch. Vega waited for her, and once she was at mere feet from him and about to launch her attack, Vega decided to face her head-on. He launched a couple of quick low kicks to her shins and abdomen to stop her motion, before launching himself forward with a roll while curled into a ball with his claws extended outwards. He crashed into Rachel in full, performing a series of tumbles and hitting her with all the strength of his spinning body before ending his attack with a thrust from his claws that struck Rachel right in the middle of her body. She was physically pushed back by the strength behind that attack and ended up falling in a prone position. Yow www. Rolling crystal flash. Rachel. Diego Carlos screamed, worried for his apprentice. All the people watching the fight thought the luchadora to be dead after receiving that stab to the chest in full. Mills Lane was about to call the fight off, when Rachel suddenly began to cough. "I'm alright, I'm alright," she said the best she could, her sternum hurting her greatly after being stabbed by Vega. "How is that I'm still alive? I should be dead after that stab, yet I'm not even bleeding," she said, trying to get back up but failing miserably due to the pain. Vega stood in a nonchalant pose and presented his claws in front of him for all to see. On closer inspection, one could see how his claws were not totally straight like needles, but were slightly bent forward at the tip with the sharp edge facing inwards like the claws of big felines, meaning that Vega's claws would never be able to kill someone with a stab, as they were not weapons made for thrusting but for slashing and cutting. "Like I said, I could never use my claws to hurt a beautiful señorita," he said, moving his ponytail over his shoulder with a carefree flick of his neck. Rachel did not know what to think. She was beginning to feel odd sensations inside her after seeing the confident pose and the suave mannerisms and chivalry of the Spanish matador. Her master's callings pulled her out of her reverie, though. "Rachel, let's switch. This opponent is obviously way beyond your league," Diego Carlos said, his smile gone for the first time during the whole fight. The blonde luchadora was taken aback by his master orders. "What? But master, this is my fight. I can deal with this well on my own," she objected, feeling her pride being wounded at his master's lack of faith on her skills. "Rachel, this is not a suggestion. I'm ordering you as your master to pull back, now," Diego Carlo replied in utmost seriousness. "Master," Rachel muttered, hurt by his master's words. She dropped her gaze in dismay. "Master, don't you have faith in me? Don't you have faith in the skills of your own disciple?" she asked with depressed mood. "Of course I do, Rachel," Diego Carlo replied truthfully immediately. The girl looked up with a hopeful stare. "I have my entire trust in your skills, but that doesn't mean I want you to fight against an opponent that has proved too out of your reach. Even I don't think I'll have an easy time trying to defeat him. But I can do it, master. I know I can win if you give me the chance." "I know, Rachel, I know, but please, trust me on this." "Trust in your master's words," he said with a wink towards his student. "Okay, master, I'll do as you say," Rachel finally said in agreement. She moved back towards the edge of the ring and switched places with her master, who entered back in the quadrilateral without taking gaze away from Vega. "Well, Senor, it seems we are just you and me now. I really appreciate you decided to spare my disciple's life, but as her master it's my duty to care for her and avenge this humiliation you have given her, so I hope you understand and not hold any ill will for what I'm about to do," Diego Carlos said, popping his shoulders and neck. Vega just let out a small laugh at the luchador's words. "Faye, let's see if you can back up those words." And just like that they began their bout. Diego Carlos suddenly disappeared and reappeared right behind Vega about to deliver a punch, who for a moment was caught by surprise by such speed. But the Spanish matador was able to block the attack, but the great strength behind it almost threatened to blow him away. He was pushed back by the powerful blow that sent him skidding for several feet, but Vega managed to remain on his feet still in his blocking stance until he came to a stop. His eyes turned serious. It seemed he will have to go all out if he wished to defeat this new opponent. Once more Diego Carlos showed his impressive speed and faded from view before reappearing back behind Vega. The Spanish ninja managed to evade the incoming attack with a backflip. Diego Carlos' fist buried itself in the canvas, going right through it and blowing the air back due to the impact. But before Vega landed back into the mat, Diego Carlo was already waiting behind him. He was barely able to avoid the luchador's punch by bending his body backwards, but once more the luchador moved behind him in the time it takes one to blink. Vega had enough, and decided to go in the offensive. He turned around and let Diego Carlo fist impact his mask, or at least that's what appeared at first sight. The thundershock from the blow shook the entire ring. The kinetic force alone would have been enough to bury Vega's head in the mat. That is if he hadn't instead used his great flexibility to time the impact and take advantage of all that force to use it to help him perform a series of backflips in his place without moving in a row, while at the same time striking at Diego Carlo with multiple slashes that left his chest covered with several bleeding gashes. Scarlet Mirage. Diego Carlo could only groan, as his wounds bleed freely and his blood began to drip on his mat. His knees began to tremble, threatening to buckle at any moment. "Master!" Rachel screamed, concerned by her master's health. But Vega was not over yet. He shot out, curled up in a ball once more and struck Diego Carlo in full, sending him into the sky. Vega kept going on his way and bounced from a corner to follow the luchador into the sky and intercepted him in the air with an Izuna drop. But as soon as the drop connected, Vega spun Diego Carlo around in a full 360 degrees circle and impacted his head on the canvas a second time, and then did it again for a third time before finally releasing the luchador as he moved away with a backflip. Something that should have been physically impossible to do. YIOWWWWWWWWWW. Thump, 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 rolling Izuna drop. In Kanto, the students watching the fight were astounded at Vega's impressive acrobatic skills. "Wow, that was so cool. I want to be able to do that," Hakufu said with stars in her eyes. At her side, Mew could only nod in awe to show her agreement. Diego Carlo muttered, holding his skull in pain as he tried to stand back up the best he could. "Master, behind you," Rachel warned, anxious. But Diego Carlo was still too disoriented to react in time. He could only turn and see how Vega was yet not done with him. The Spanish ninja kicked Diego Carlo right in the chest with a back kick. Cosmic heel. Before making a brief pose and kicking his opponent again with a slide kick, followed by a scarlet terror that sent Diego Carlo sky high, and just when he was about to fall back down on top of Vega, the Spaniard matador performed a slash in a wide arc above him that struck the luchador full in the back, giving him one nasty wound all over it. Somehow, rose petals were scattered to the four winds and fell all over the place from the attack, and covered the ring in a crimson carpet that blended with the luchador's blood. Vega began to laugh in a cruel, mocking, deranged laugh. Yow www. Splendid claw. Ha 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 ha. No, Rachel cried, believing her master dead, tears flowing freely from her eyes. Everybody watching the fight thought Diego Carlo was done for, so it came as a surprise when he recovered, still in the air, right before he was about to fall back down from the last attack, and slammed upon Vega with the weight of his whole body, catching the Spaniard matador off guard. Diego Tika body press. Diego then grabbed Vega while he was still atop of him in the mat and tried to drive him straight through the canvas in an attempt to crush him, the impact of such move resonating all over the place. Diego ticked down, but Diego's efforts would fail before he was able to complete his assault, as the wounds his body had received began to flare. So he instead grabbed Vega once more and tossed him up in the air. "Now Rachel," he yelled to his disciple, before he jumped towards Rachel and switched places with her. The young luchadora immediately climbed the third rope and launched herself from there towards Vega. Rachel crashed on the Spaniard in full as he was falling and began to strike him all around his body with her arms and legs while still on the air. Rachel crash. As soon as Vega fell upon the canvas and Rachel's feet touched the ground again, the masked blonde grabbed him from behind by wrapping her arms around his torso, put her head under Vega's arm, lifted him up and fell backwards while dropping the Spaniard flat on his back. Rachel suplex. Rachel then let go of Vega and turned around. She grabbed both of the Spaniard's arms from behind and locked them with her own, then hoisted him up by letting herself fall upon the mat on her back before finishing her move by locking her legs with Vega's own, effectively suspending him in the air in a submission grapple. Romero special. Pan made another comment regarding the battle. "It seems they were finally able to catch Vega. I wonder if he'll be able to resist that hold, it looks painful." Sagat only grunted in reply. Vega will not be so easily defeated. The great flexibility of his body allows him to resist most holds. He would have already found a way to break it if it wasn't for his limbs being restrained so thoroughly. he said without taking his eyes from the fight. Rachel kept Vega locked in her grapple, pulling at both his arms and legs to hurt him and force him to submit. Mills Lane had approached to oversee the situation and stand ready in case Vega was ready to give up or not. "How are you holding up, son? Can you continue, or do you wish to give up?" Vega only answered with a small grunt. "I am fine, it would take more than this to make me submit." He turned his neck to look behind him towards Rachel. "So my beauty, do you have the strength to win this battle of wills?" he asked while he kept enduring the hold. "Shut up. I'll teach you not to put my strength in doubt," she said before strengthening her hold and putting more pressure over Vega's limbs. The two continued with their struggle for several minutes, with Rachel increasing her strength through several intervals to force Vega to submit, but the Spaniard matador endured through all the pain while barely giving any sign of discomfort. The people watching the fight began to wonder how Vega was able to resist such punishment, and once more their excitement began to grow at witnessing such willpower. "Come on Vega, you have to hold up. You can do it. Just take it for a few more minutes. She's beginning to tire out. Don't give up now." Diego Carlo tried to give his disciple some words of encouragement. "You're doing it well, Rachel. Keep doing it just that way. He can be able to resist much longer." He was so engrossed in the ongoing struggle, just like everybody else, that he didn't saw the gloved fist that hit him square in the jaw. "Pow, shut up will ya? I'm tired of watching those two. I'll think I'll use you as a punching bag for the moment to entertain me," he said before delivering a barrage of punches at Diego Carlo's body and then ending his attack with a hook to the face and a headbutt. He'd leaved as quickly as he had come and returned to his side of the ring on the outside. He put himself right in plain sight of Mills Lane, just in time as Diego Carlo came chasing after him with the intent of getting revenge for those cheap shots. "Hey, what you think you're doing out there? Knock it off already," Mills Lane said after seeing Diego Carlo trying to attack Balrog. He moved away from the two combatants still locked in a grapple and went over the ropes to admonish the infuriated luchador. While both Mills and Diego locked themselves in a shouting match, Balrog quickly circled around the ring until he was outside of Mills Lane. He then entered the ring and got close to the two struggling combatants before bringing his fist down right on Rachel's face, breaking the hold she had on Vega. Balrog then kept pummeling Rachel's face while she was still on the ground, damaging her further. Vega, quick on the uptake, hoisted Rachel up by passing his arms from underneath her own and presented her towards his partner, leaving her helpless against Balrog's combinations of punches. The former prized fighter delivered several 1-2s to her abdomen before finishing his assault with a nasty hook to her skull. The young luchadora would have already fallen to the canvas almost unconscious if it wasn't for Vega who was holding her up. "Rachel!" Diego Carlo screamed, seeing the beating his student was receiving. And just as he had come, Balrog swiftly left the ring, sliding from underneath the ropes, just in time as Mills Lane turned around after having the focus of his attention switched by Diego Carlo's screams, but all he could see was Vega already on his feet behind Rachel and about to perform a suplex on the luchadora. Rainbow suplex. "Wham! Goddamn Balrog, he's such a cheater," Whip mentioned with a shake of her head. Pan just shrugged in reply. "Well, it's not like this is any kind of official competitive match anyway." Rachel's head hit the mat hard and was left lying on the mat barely conscious. By sheer luck she had been knocked down close to the edge of her side of the ring. Diego Carlo didn't waste time to get close to her and stretched his arm over her downed form to give her the switching signal and changed places with her. He entered back on the ring with the intent of killing Vega. He didn't waste time with words and went immediately after the Spaniard. Vega just saw him, and immediately shot himself, curled into a ball, to his corner with his flying Barcelona special, where Balrog was already waiting for him and gave him the switching signal before bouncing back into the air towards Diego Carlo's direction. The big luchador just followed him with his eyes and was about to jump after him to deliver his revenge, when he received a dash attack from Balrog right underneath his chin, dash straight. The punch left Diego Carlo reeling, and in the perfect state for Balrog to deliver further combinations of attacks. He kept pummeling the helpless luchador until he was sure it was time to deliver the final blow, in the form of one of his strongest techniques. He got into position, punched his gloved fists together, flexed out one of his biceps, "Say goodnight, chump." Before delivering 4 savage punches, each and every single one of them with the same strength as one of his dash attacks, as each one managed to break the wind and make it whistle. And finished his attack with one violent and powerful uppercut that displaced a great amount of air with the shockwave alone and sent Diego Carlos soaring high up into the air, higher than any other punch delivered before and well above even the heights reached by Vega's jumps. Violent Buffalo. All of those who were watching the fight could only gape jaw-slacked at the great height achieved by that punch. Finally, Diego Carlos slammed back down into the canvas and didn't get back up. He's been knocked out. He's out of this fight, Mills Lane declared after getting closer to check Diego Carlos' condition. Master, Rachel cried with extreme worry, after managing to look back up only to see his master being so savagely defeated. No, she struggled to get back up despite the protests of her injured body. You hurt my master. I'm going to kill you, she screamed with great affront. Balrog simply laughed seeing the state she was. What are you going to do, girlie? Throw your mask at me. Go back to sleep before I decide to put your lights off, the boxer said mockingly. Rachel roared in anger at his words. She stood back up despite her broken state and rushed at Balrog on a blind rage. Her speed turned out to be still quite impressive despite her injuries, which caught the enormous former prize fighter off guard, allowing her to nail one simple powerful punch with all her strength and rage behind it right into Balrog's face. The shockwave of the punch rattled the entire place up. Whamm. Ah, you damn brat. That actually hurt, Balrog replied irate, relatively okay after that punch. Rachel was actually surprised that the tall African American was still standing after that punch, right before Balrog delivered to her a nasty headbutt as retaliation and restrained her by circling his giant arms around her torso and then started trying to crush her with a mighty embrace. Let's see how you get out of this, brat, Rachel screamed as the giant boxer tried to crush her thoracic cage with a bear hug. One could hear her bones crunching under the overwhelming pressure they were being submitted. Rachel began to drive her knee into Balrog's side and wiggled in desperation trying to break his hold on her. She kept kicking him without stopping, using her speed and strength to land dozens of strikes with the strength of a piston into Balrog's ribcage while she kept jostling in his grasp. Hey, knock it off. Her efforts managed to bear fruit in the end, as Balrog began to cave in under her constant barrage of knee strikes. With one final mighty push, Rachel was able to finally break through his hold and leave the boxer wide open with his arms extended while she was left hanging with her feet floating above the ground as she grabbed the arms of Balrog to support herself. In this position, neither of the two could use their arms, but Rachel was free to use her legs. She bent herself forwards and circled his neck with her thighs. Diego Stick Steiner, before slamming his skull on the canvas with the same spinning throw that her master had performed at the beginning of this match. God damn it, that's the second time I get my skull smashed with that technique, Balrog wailed, rising back up again, a bruise forming in his forehead. That's it, I've had enough of this, Vega, she's your opponent, you deal with her. I'm out of here, he stated before walking out of the ring, not before changing places with Vega. The Spaniard Matador simply approached the masked luchadora with a confident, cocky step. Well, my dear, it seems it's time to put an end to this waltz of ours. Rachel gulped a little in dread but tried to put a brave front. She knew she would not be able to defeat Vega in the state she was in, but she could not just give up without trying. You two hurt my master. I will not forgive either of you for what you have done. I don't care if I have no chance to win. I will not simply back down without a fight, she said, getting on a fighting stance. Vega simply acknowledged her words with an elegant pose. Very well, if that is your wish, who am I to deny the wishes of a beautiful señorita? He also took his own fighting chance. This will be our last dance. Come at me then if you dare. Both combatants remained staring impassively at each other without moving for a long moment, gauging each other's strength. Everybody knew this was going to be the last move that would decide the match, so the tension revolving about the scene was pretty high. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel made her move and disappeared from everybody's sight altogether. It was then that Vega reacted and shot himself forward again with a flying Barcelona attack charged with great strength. It seemed to hit Rachel in full, as she appeared out of nowhere and was sent soaring into the sky. Vega bounced from a corner and went to intercept her, This time he attacked her with her claws while in the air and slashed her across her face where her mask was. The strike pushed her back up a little, and as Vega went back down and his feet touched the canvas once more, he was ready for the falling body of Rachel to get in range for his next move. He readied his claws. Soak in your own blood. Bloody high claw. Vega screamed as he leapt back into a corner and performed a series of multiple sky-high claws that intercepted Rachel as she was falling back down and struck her in quick succession, leaving a crimson trail behind each pass, each of the attack rising higher and higher in altitude and scattering rose petals around the ring once more. Vega was laughing sadistically during the entire. The Spaniard landed on his feet on the middle of the ring and offered a bow to his audience. He then put his arms in front on him just in time for Rachel to fall into his waiting arms. Despite the recent attack she received, she didn't look any worse for wear. That is until her entire costume ripped itself to pieces, leaving her only tatters that barely covered her modesty. Her mask splitted in half and fell off her face. "What?" Rachel screeched, trying to cover her ample assets from view the best she could. After all, she was being recorded and watched by the entire world. Vega set her back down into the canvas gently. "What happened? Why did you spared my life again?" she asked, puzzled by the Spanish ninja actions. "It would have been a great shame to destroy such a splendid beauty like yours," he said as he took off his mask and pulled out a single red rose that he gave to Rachel. The girl took the rose as her face began to turn the same color as the flower. She was totally unprepared for Vega's sophisticated attractiveness, as she had never in her life dealt with something like this before. "Goddamn, can't believe Vega is trying to put some moves on his female opponent right in the middle of a match," Maxima said with mild disbelief. "Well, he was giving roses to all the women of our group the other day when he, Balrog and Sagat arrived. He even gave one to Pan and Kula," Whip said in recollection. "Don't remind me of that," Kay said, trying to keep his anger down at the memory of the Spaniard matador trying to seduce his sister. "Yeah, what's up with that?" Pan asked, estranged, turning towards Sagat as she remembered that day. She took the rose all right, and she will be lying if she said she hadn't felt flattered, but she just couldn't comprehend why the unexpected chivalry. "Is he always like that?" "Vega has a pretty peculiar way of seeing the world. He believes all beautiful people must be good and on the side of justice, and all ugly people must be on the side of evil. He feels the need that all women who fulfill his standards of beauty should be praised and worshipped because of it. This drives him to refrain from killing any women he deems as beautiful. This does not completely stop him from doing so, however, as he has done so several times in the past under orders from Bison in order to fulfill our previous boss wishes, but it does make him restrain his hand when he has no reason to take a life," Sagat stated impassively. "So he will not be going out there killing women unless specifically under my orders." "Good to know," Pan commented, turning her gaze back to the ring. "He's just a vain asshole," Yuri scoffed in derision, putting an end to the conversation. Back on the ring, Diego Carlo suddenly began to mutter some words, trying to call his disciple despite his broken state. Rachel, master, you're still awake," the blonde luchadora said in surprise and relief. "So he's still conscious. He better not try to interfere with our match. Otherwise I'm afraid I will find myself in the necessity of putting him down again," Vega said a little uncaring, bringing his claws forwards. "No, please wait. That will not be necessary," Rachel interjected, signaling the Spanish ninja not to do anything with her hand. She trailed off and lowered her gaze. For a moment she contemplated the rose that Vega had given her with a semi-dejected contemplative look. She released a sigh. "It's obvious I'm no match for you. So please, don't do anything against my master. I forfeit this match. Just don't hurt my sensei anymore," she pleaded. "Very well then, I gracefully accept your surrender, my lovely señorita," Vega replied smoothly as he kissed Rachel's hand. Mills Lane approached Vega and raised his arm up by the wrist. "The winners of this tag team match by KO and forfeit, Vega and Balrog," he declared, also motioning with his free arm to the former prize fighter outside the ring. "Balrog Diego Carlo vs Vega Rachel Stanley winners, Balrog and Vega KO. Forfeit." The audience began to clap and cheer at the combatants after the conclusion of this match. Even Pan was pleased by the performance of the fighters serving under her. Everybody was about to move on and decide who will be fighting next, when suddenly Vega's senses, honed by decades of training in the art of ninjutsu to be aware of his surroundings, detected a sudden incoming danger. He picked up Rachel once more bridal style and got out of the way with a backflip just as something struck the ring with great force in the spot where the young luchadora had just been previously at. The force of the impact kicked a large cloud of dust and the shockwave of the blow was felt through the entire construction site. Vega landed with a crouch on his feet with Rachel still in his arms. The girl was momentarily frozen with shock by the sudden attack. Everybody looked at the cloud of dust until it began to fade away and revealed a stoic Mikumo Kusanada standing in the middle of the ring. "So you managed to evade my attack, impressive." She spoke in a monotone. Shinada." Diego Carlo muttered, trying to turn around and look at the cold expressionless woman. "Diego Carlo, I warned you what would happen if you and your disciple failed Yami again. This time I'll make sure there are no interruptions," she said before fading out of sight as another powerful impact struck the position where Diego Carlo was sprawled over the mat. "Master!" Rachel screamed, believing her teacher dead. The cloud of dust from the second strike parted away, and revealed Pan standing in front of Diego Carlo and stopping Kusanada's attack with a single finger. Everybody's held their breaths when they saw the expression of mild irritation in the alien girl face. "What do you think you're doing? Well then, this is where I'm going to end this chapter for now. Next we are going to have even more battles and even more surprises, so stay tuned." Damn, I'm only beginning this and I can already tell this is going to be a pretty long arc. Oh, but I want to have battles in this fic so. Anyway, just be on the lookout for the next chapter and leave a review in the meantime. This is Diego Carlo actual beliefs and ideals. As he indeed followed on his word after Ma Kensai defeated him and told him to surrender himself to the police. Why too much weird shit in this chapter? Because that's a regular thing in anime. Most overbearing characters like Diego Carlo or Metaguy are always pulling off crap like this at every moment. It also happens regularly to most lead characters of the romantic comedies. I mean, I was watching To Love Ru recently and there was this chapter where the blonde school queen, haven't learned her name yet as of just began to watch the series, challenges Lala to a swimsuit competition and out of nowhere a giant crane appears and grabs Raito with its hook. I was feeling just like him when he asks, where the hell this giant crane came from? And the girl driving the machine answers, I have a license to operate heavy machinery. I was like, well good for you bitch, but that doesn't answer my question of where the fuck you got a giant crane in the first place. Also, these kinds of things are the bread and butter of other series like Hayate the Combat Butler, where in the first 3 seconds you are already witnessing and laughing at ridiculous crap. Hayate, Santa, why you never bring me any gifts? Smiling Santa, it's because your family is poor. See what I mean? Also, why Mills Lane? Because I was watching old episodes of Celebrity Deathmatch and I remembered how awesome of a referee he was. This was a last-minute addition, but I knew I had to include him in this story. 3. I was checking the Bunshin technique that appears in the Kenichi's manga and I realized they were nothing more but afterimages, optical illusions without real thought or motion. Even Shio Sakari states it so during the Weapon Master's arc when he tries to touch one of Kusanada's Bunshins and his hand passes right through it. This is the same technique that Goku learned during his training with Master Roshi, and that he uses most prominently in his battles against his own master, disguised as Jackie Chung, and against Tien Shin Han in both finals of the martial arts tournament. I do believe Balrog can go toe-to-toe against Diego Carlo and take all of his punches. I mean, in the games all characters can block most attacks. If the Metsu Hadoken of Ryu can be blocked, Chun-Li's kicks alongside her Kaikosho, that by the way according to SFIV can stop an incoming car cold in his tracks, and other more painful attacks like Blanca's electric attacks or her spinning lunges, Hugo's massive punches or Bison's Psycho Crusher, then he damn well can take Diego Carlo's punches. He is depicted in the SF OVAs, comics and other Japanese animations to have a very impressive resistance to blows. And about if he could knock out one of Yami's Grandmaster with his punches too, hell yeah he can. This is anime after all punches look more impressive than what they really are. I mean, have you seen how the characters in Hajime no Ippo connect their punches? They look as if they're trying to fracture their opponent's skulls, or rip their the fucking head off altogether. have you seen the fight of date against the world champion? And that was only the featherweight division. I don't want to think how the heavyweight division, Balrog division, would be like. Vega can definitively kick the ass of both Rachel and his master in the air hands down. He is one of the highest top-tier fighters in Street Fighter whose specialty is aerial maneuvers. As many of his techniques are pretty sick, he is also one of the best fighters from SF you can use in Street Fighter X Tekken. He's no joke, as both Cammy and Chun-Li take him pretty seriously when they stumble upon him. Both get pretty on edge when he's around as they knew he can be deadly dangerous. I mean, there is a reason why he and Balrog shared the same position as Bison's top enforcers in Shadaloo alongside Sagat, because they are on the level. And Sagat can beat the crap out of Ryu anytime, he has done so several times in the past. Don't come telling me that he's the one who gave Sagat his scar, bitch please. Sagat was kicking his ass all over the place and he only won because he lost control over his skills and went all Dark Hado on him. Being unable to remain focused and go all berserk is hardly something worthy of praise. He practically won only by Deus Ex Machina. Besides, Sagat is a grandmaster of his art on his own and Vega and Balrog are on a same standing with him. So no bitching about how they can't fight one-on-one against the Yami masters if given the chance. What do you think you're doing? Pan asked in a low tone that heralded to Kushinada's she better had a good excuse if she didn't wanted her spine to be removed forcefully, as she kept the elder woman's fist on place using only her index finger. Despite the stoic expression in the century-old grandmaster, one could clearly see the beads of sweat dripping from her forehead. I'm just removing these useless vermin. They have failed Yami twice now, and failure in this organization means death. We have no use for weaklings among our ranks. Kushinada said as politely as she could. A small frown began to appear on Pan's face as she took a brief pause to delve in those words. At large she spoke. I don't know if you were not paying attention or just simply forgot. But I specifically stated that if any of you were to lose your fights you were all going to join my alliance and serve under my orders. Which means, the moment Diego Carlo lost he stopped being a member of Yami and became one of my minions. He is mine now, his life and that of his disciple belong to me and only I can decide whether they live or die. And you tried to kill him, you tried to take something of my property away from me, so tell me, why should I not kill you where you stand? Kushinada couldn't help but gulp in nervousness. She was pretty aware these could be her last words, but pride was hard to keep silent. Why do you care so much about their lives? They both have already proven to be weaklings, why would you bother yourself with them? Pan just released an unamused sigh, as if trying to contain herself from lashing out. You do not have the right to point out who is a weakling and who is not. You're all weaklings compared to me, she said. Before releasing a tiny fraction of her power for all to sense, the earth began to rumble and Kushinada let out a gasp as she and the rest of the Yami Grandmasters were overwhelmed by Pan's ki and fell to their knees. Kushinada herself could barely believe such power could exist, as she barely avoided from kissing the canvas and was forced to kneel in front of Pan's feet with her head bowed as she struggled from fully falling down due to the great pressure exerted by the alien's girl sheer power. Most of the people who could sense ki also ended up falling to the ground or to their knees, whether be from Yomi or from Pan's own followers. They all agreed that the power of the Saiyan girl was simply unbelievable. And she wasn't even winded by this impressive show of ki, meaning it must have been only a small fraction of her true potential, a thought that many found horrifying. See, Pan said before suppressing her power again. As far as it goes, I can bother myself with whoever I want and there's not a single thing you or anyone else can do about it. Besides, for a human, Diego Carlo was pretty strong and I kinda liked his attitude. He has the right idea as some of his views of life are pretty similar to those of a Saiyan, so I feel we are going to get along just fine. But not only you tried to kill someone under my protection, you also tried to kill one of your comrades. We Saiyans may be heartless killers who wouldn't hesitate to annihilate an entire species if we have to, but among our kind, the only loyalty we have goes towards the group we belong to. You see, Saiyans' relationships are pretty different from your own. We do not have much of a concept of family. Most of the time a Saiyan will not feel any kind of bond, not even to its own blood relatives. Son and father, brothers and sisters could kill each other with the same detachment they have when destroying entire planets. But we do tend to have close relationships with our friends and comrades, however, as they are the ones with whom we spend a great deal of time when in battle. This is because of our peculiar social interactions. Saiyans tend to join together in groups, which use Sally, this being the team they will take missions and conquer planets with. To a Saiyan, the members of his group are closer and more precious to him than even his own family or any mate or lover could ever hope to be. As they are the people who will fight alongside him through hell and back, who will kill and die for him at a moment's notice. For the members of his group, a Saiyan will go to any length to do whatever as they would ask of him without hesitation, and they in turn will do the same for him. It is not unusual for this reason that Saiyans tend to find their soulmates between the members of their own group. Saiyan children who are not sent as babies to conquer weaker planets grow and spend most of their time among their parents' group until they are old enough to leave and join a group of their own. So for you to have tried to kill one of your own comrades, we Saiyans may be a very cruel and harsh race. We can commit the genocide of an entire species with the same care one shows when squashing a bug, but know this, Saiyans do not betray their own. What you have done, it is considered one of the most serious sins and crimes in Saiyan society, for it goes against one of our most sacred beliefs. Pan grabbed Kushinada by the neck with one hand, hoisted her up as she began to float, leaving the helpless Grandmaster at Pan's mercy with her feet hanging above the ground. I should kill you here right now for what you've done. If it wasn't because I promised you all would have the chance to face one of my minions without me intervening, I would have crushed your neck already, as easily as one crushes a cracker. Pan threatened with a low, dangerous voice as her grip around Kushinada's neck tightened. The 100-year-old woman began to struggle, trying uselessly to fight against the unyielding grip that blocked her breathing canals. Pan brought the squirming woman up to her face, and looked at her straight to the eyes with an unmoving stare. Let's get things straight. You just pissed me off with that little stunt you tried to pull, but since I don't want to break my promise to one of my minions of giving them the chance to have a good fight, I'm willing to be merciful just this once. But do something like this again and I will not hesitate to rip your spine with my bare hands and toss it into the sun. Is that clear? She asked with a harsh stare. Grrk. Yes, Kushinada croaked the best she could as she struggled to breath. Good, Pan said, letting go of the eternally young woman who fell to the ground on her rump, pretty shaken up by Pan's threat. It had been many decades since Kushinada had felt fear so overwhelming like this. Pan lifted the broken Diego Carlo over her head with one hand and called for the Spanish ninja, who was still waiting on the other side of the ring with Rachel on his arms, without looking back. Vega, go back with the others and take Rachel with you. I'll take care of bringing her master along. You, Vega nodded before doing as she said. Pan then pointed towards Mills Lane with her free arm. Carry on and set the next fight. Mills Lane was caught off guard for a moment. There's going to be more fights. Yes, each of all these people. Pan motioned towards the gathered Yami masters and their disciples. Against one of my people. She finished, now pointing towards her minions. Huh, fine, it doesn't seem I have much choice but to agree to continue with this thing. He grumbled before he approached to the edge of the ring and addressed the collective of fighters. Pan took this chance to return to her lines carrying Diego Carlo. Alright, who's next? You all going to come up on this ring or are you going to choose a different setting? He asked, making several of the awaiting combatants to start pondering in their decision. I don't care how it is done. I just want to fight already. I'm tired to wait and that last fight really got my blood pumping. Berserker said, restless. I agree with Blondie. We've waited long enough. K. 9999 said, crackling his knuckles. Yeah, but how are we going to do this? Foxy asked, pointedly. Are we going to carry these battles one by one or several at a time? Are we going to agree for them to be with no holds barred or with certain conditions? Well, I say we should have several fights at the same time, otherwise we're going to be here the whole day before every one of us has a chance to fight. K. said, I agree with that proposal. Agard Jumsai said, from where he was standing. But our disciples go first, as Kushinada had stated previously. Then what are you waiting for? Send those brats forwards already. Yuri exclaimed with a hint of impatience. Most of the members of Yomi moved forwards and stood in a straight line in front of Pan's forces, from left to right, Shugo Kitsukawa aka Berserker, Ryoto Asamiya aka Odin, Rimi Kokuron, Tiraat Koken, Kojima Satomi, Ethan Stanley, Chikage Kushinada, Boris Ivanov, and from the armed division Sigmaringen, who couldn't wait to fight anymore and managed to displace Luff for the right to fight in this turn. MMMMPH. Okay, I guess they're enough for now, otherwise they would get too overcrowded to be able to fight properly. Agard Jumsai commented, delimiting the size of the first wave. Most of Yomi armed division would remain behind and wait for the next turn. Pan stared at Ryoto with an incredulous look. Are you sure you wish to send a guy in a wheelchair to fight against my people? I mean, that doesn't look pretty fair to me, she said, tailing off a little. Do not underestimate just because I'm confined to this wheelchair. Ryoto yelled a little harshly. Even with this disability, I'm more than capable of dealing with any enemy you throw at me. Very well, if that is your wish, Pan said impassively. She turned towards her followers. All right people, whoever wants to fight in this turn step forward and choose your partner. She ordered. I want this one. I know he's going to be fun. K. 9999 said, moving in front of Berserk with a deranged smile. The blonde reckless fighter replied with his own creepy smile, and both once more looked themselves in a battle of wills. Ryoto raised his hand. Can we make suggestions of who we want to fight? He asked to Pan. Who do you have in mind? Inquired the alien girl. I wish to fight against Mr. Yagami over there, Ryoto said, pointing towards the redhead who was simply lying back with his hands inside his pockets. Pan turned to look at Iori. So Iori, what do you say? Care to grant the request of the disabled kid? She asked, pissing Ryoto a little from the uncaring way she referred to his disability. Iori seemed to consider his answer for a moment. Fine, I will fight against him, he said, and walked towards Ryoto. Look Kula, there's a girl close to your age over there. Why don't you go and play with her? Diana said as she nudged the ice wielder towards Kushinada's foster daughter direction. Okay, she said while licking her lollipop, and went to stand in front of Chikage, who turned awestruck the moment her eyes caught sight of Kula's lollipop. She seemed to enter in a trance as she stood watching the piece of candy with a face of childish yearning. The rest of the disciples began to meet their opponents one by one. Angel stood in front of Rimi, Kay stood in front of Tiraat, Nameless stood in front of Kojima, Maxima stood in front of Ethan, Yuri stood in front of Boris Ivanov. That only leaved Sigmaringen as the last disciple to be assigned an opponent. That last one is wielding a scythe. Which one of you likes to use a weapon? Pan asked, turning to her followers. Don't look at me, I have just finished a fight of my own. Give me a few minutes to rest before I can take a go at it again. Vega said as he passed a hand through his long lustrous hair tied in a ponytail. Pan and her followers turned towards Foxy and Diana next. Don't look at us either, it will be a waste of our fencing skills to use them to fight against some brat. Foxy said, a little disdainful. All of the presents then turned towards Dr. Jackal, who looked back at them with a smiling face, and both sides stared at each other for a moment. Everybody shook their heads unanimously and declined that idea. Some even began to express their pity for the poor bastard whoever had the rotten luck of facing Dr. Jackal in combat. Nah, that would be much too overkill. I think I prefer to leave Dr. Jackal in reserve as our ace in the hole for the moment. Pan commented. Okay, who else? Now they all turned to look in the direction of Whip, with Kagero-sai also standing towering at her side. Whip turned to glance at the swordsman, who oddly enough was wielding a hoe rather than a sword, and all she saw was the dumb expression in the black-clad man's face that clearly told he had no idea of what was happening around him, or if he had, he simply didn't give a fuck. Whip couldn't stop herself from facepalming and released a sigh in frustration. I'll do it, she said in resignation, and went to stand in front of Sigmaringen. Mills Lane got down off the ring and approached the lined fighters. Alright, so you all are going to have a go at it next. Very well, how you want to do this? He asked. All of the combatants under Pan's command turned at her and gave her an expectant look. First of all, you fight as you are, no taking the turtle shell off unless I permit it. The fights themselves will have no holds barred and will not stop until one of the combatants is unable to continue. Lethal moves will be left to the discretion of each fighter. Pan listed nonchalantly. That's just my kind of fight. K. 9999 said, bumping his fists in anticipation. Alright, let's do this already, he declared, and was about to launch himself at his opponent when Mills Lane intervened. Hold it right there, son. These fights do not start until I said so back off until I give you the signal, Mills Lane said authoritatively. K. 9999 was apt to retort with a nasty comeback, but a look from Pan told him to behave. He sighed in frustration and went back to stand with the others. Mills Lane went and stood between K. 9999 and Berserker. Alright, you two, get over here. He signaled the two fighters to approach. Now, this fight would be your typical street brawl. It will be a no-holds-barred engagement with absolutely no rules to follow, so you're free to do whatever is necessary to win. Lethal moves, well, that's up to you two if you want to use them or not, but regardless of that, this fight will not stop until one of you turns the lights off to their opponent. Do you understand this conditions, gentlemen? He asked, looking to both fighters. Just gives us the signal, goddammit, Berserker said, not willing to wait anymore. Yeah, I want to start this fight before I turn your age, old man. K. 9999 remarked with his own impatience. Mills Lane just sighed and shook his head. Damn, this kids today, no respect for their elders. Fine, suit yourselves, let's get in on, he declared, pumping his fist before moving to the next combatants. Fall of Yami Round 2, Berserker vs K. 9999. Both combatants rushed at each other with maniac grins plastered on their faces, both of their fists connected with each other's face at the same time, a loud thunderclap being released from the impact, the two of them happy beyond measure now that the fight was finally on. Mills Lane approached to the next set of combatants and called them to the center as he had done previously. Alright, you two already heard me telling the rules to those wackos behind me, don't you? So let's make this quick. A loud sonic boom was heard behind him. Mills Lane simply ignored it. Since I can't ask for a good clean fight, then at least let me ask for a good entertaining fight that is satisfactory to all the parties involved. Don't know how you're going to manage that since one of you is bound to a wheelchair, but whatever, it's your choice. Alright, are you both ready? He asked. Both Iori and Ryoto gave him a wordless nod. Then, let's get it on, Mills said, pumping his fist again and moving to the next fighters. Iori Yagami vs Ryoto Asamiya. Both combatants assumed fig-thing stances and stared at each other. Before we begin, let me tell you it is a great honor to fight a warrior of your quality, Mr. Yagami. I'll have a good anecdote to boast about once I defeat you, Ryoto said with an arrogant grin. Iori gave a smirk of his own. Faye, let's see if you can put your money where your mouth is. I will not go easy on you despite you being a cripple, he said, before redlining his extremely sharp nails and rushing at Ryoto. Mills Lane stood between the next combatants, Angel and Remy. First of all, let me just say how glad I am for not being the father of either one of you, because I would have probably died of a heart attack already after seeing the way you two dress. Hey. Remy retorts, a little insulted. But don't take me wrong, Mills Lane continued without batting an eyelash at the affronted face that the Lolita-dressed girl was giving him. Like any other man, I'm always in the mood to watch a good old catfight. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of tapes of this fight stashed inside the drawers of many horny teenage boys by tomorrow next morning. That last comment wiped off the smile out of Angel and made her frown a little. But never mind that anyway, let's get it on, he said, pumping his fist again and moving on the next fighters. Angel vs Remy Kokoron. The two women took their fighting stances and stared at each other. Angel was grinning mischievously to her opponent. So kitty cat, I hope can give me a good time. It gets too boring when my opponents can't keep up with me, the former Nest's assassin said, rather chirpy. Remy just scowled at her. Don't make fun of Remy, or Remy will destroy you, she said before throwing a punch at Angel's smiling face. The image of the Mexican woman simply distorted and stopped from being there anymore. Remy just had a second to express her puzzlement before she felt a sharp pain exploding on her side as Angel connected a kick on her ribs. The impact sent the blonde girl to the ground. Remy could do nothing but clutch her side on pain as she stared up at a still smiling angel towering above her. Now, kitty cat, please don't tell me that's all you can do. It's not any fun when my toys break too soon, she said before the expression on her face became deranged and her smile turned outright disturbing. Mills Lane was already giving the highlights to the next pair of combatants. Alright, you two look like pretty decent fellows, so I guess I should not waste time explaining you the rules, he said, turning glancing between Kay and Tira at Koken, who just stood there silently without any worry. So let's just get it on, Mills said, pumped his fist and kept moving on. Kay versus Tira at Kokin. Both bronze-skinned fighters assumed a fighting stance, stared at each other for a few moments, before both attacked at each other at the same time. Kay with a punch and Tira with a knee strike. The attacks connected with each other, releasing a small thunderclap before both combatants went back to a neutral stance and kept assessing each other. Mills Lane called the next fighters to the center, Kojima, Satomi and Nameless. Well, look at you two, all somber and mysterious with those rigid stances of yours. I don't know what happened to you two to have such grim faces, and frankly I don't want to know. Let's just focus on what we came here to do. You can sort out whatever issues you have once you're out of the ring. Now, let's get it on, he said with his usual signal and moved on the next fighters. Kojima, Satomi versus Nameless. Let us begin with this combat. This will be a good chance to show the superiority of my martial arts, Kojima said, taking a stance. Nameless just looked at him and scoffed, before taking off his glove and launching a stream of fire at Kojima in a single swipe. The one-eyed young man was surprised by that kind of attack for a second, before he blocked it. The strength of the flames pushed him back a couple of feet, but he was able to successfully block the attack. But once he was about to lower his arms, he took notice of the pain it cost him to try to move them. Doing a quick inspection, he discovered how his arms had been singed and burned by the flames. Nameless just kept speaking with a stoic face. Let's do this quickly. The fate of someone very dear to me depends on me showing my worth to Pan. On that note alone, there's no way some lowly thrill-seeker like you could ever hope to defeat me, for I will not allow it. I will burn anyone that stands in my way, he said with determination as his fist was caught on fire and began to burn with an intense blue flame. Mills Lane was already sorting out the next combatants. Alright, now's your turn. Personally, I believe it's a little unfair to have a youngster fight against a full-grown man. But you seem to have been grown quite well, son, so I guess you should be fine, he said, speaking towards the tall and muscular Ethan Stanley, who was standing in front of the also taller and breader Maxima. You all know the rules, so let's get it on, Mills said, pumping his fist before stepping away. Ethan Stanley versus Maxima. I apologize beforehand for what I'm about to do, Ethan said with a little bow before assuming a combat stance. Do not worry. I'll make sure to contain myself enough to not kill you. Maxima just smirked at Ethan's statement. Bold words for a little brat like you. Let's see if you can back them up, he said, taking his own combat stance. They both stared at each other for a few moments before Maxima lunged towards Ethan and threw a straight punch at him with his big arm, at a slow speed for some reason. Ethan easily ducked under the attack and then rushed forward to strike at Maxima's arm on his marma points and render the limb useless. Killer SAMUDAMUSHIKA. The blonde young man stepped away from Maxima and lowered his guard. I have struck the marma points along your arm. You will not be able to move your limb for the next few hours, he stated matter-of-factly, before Maxima struck him full in the face with that same arm with the strength of a ramming truck. Ethan was driven to the ground with such a great impact that a thick cloud of dust was released from the crash. It took a moment for Ethan to push himself from off the ground. He coughed a little due to the dust and realized how he was bleeding from the mouth after that last hit. He looked up at Maxima with an expression of utter perplexity. How? You shouldn't be able to move your arm after I struck your pressure points. Pressure points? Is that what you were trying to do to me? I'm sorry, kiddo, but that is not going to work on me. In order to join Nests, I had to replace 80% of my body with cybernetics and become a cyborg super soldier. Trying to attack my pressure points is a wasted effort, since I no longer have most of them, Maxima declared rather unconcerned. Ethan could only look at him in complete shock. knowing that most of his techniques in his repertoire would be totally useless against someone like Maxima. The tall cyborg just simply cracked his knuckles before speaking again. Now, come on then, get back up and let us resume our fight. I want to try the new upgrades Pan's been giving me over the last week, he said with a grin. Ethan could not help but release a gulp. Mills Lane had moved on the next combatants and was standing between the two youngest members of each group, Kula and Chikage Kushinada. Now, sweethearts, I'm not entirely comfortable in allowing two cute little girls like you engage in a bloody street brawl with no holds barred until one of you is left broken and bloodied in the floor. And, you're not even listening to me, do you? He deadpanned, looking between the unconcerned Kula, that wasn't focusing on anything else, that wasn't licking her lollipop, and the entranced Chikage that couldn't take her eyes from the year-older girl's candy, a small bit of drool showing from the corner of her mouth. Mills Lane could only stare at them both with a blank look. Ah, whatever. I really don't care what you girls do. It can't be worse than force you two to a last man standing or girl in your case fight. Just go and do whatever you may want. Let's get it on, Mills said, with his usual fist pumping, and moved to the next couple of fighters. Kula Diamond vs Chikage Kushinada. Both girls didn't move a muscle, focusing instead in keeping rooted to their spots doing the activities they already had underway. Kula enjoying licking her big lollipop with her attention closed to anything else, the same as her eyes. Chikage, staring at the big, colorful and tempting piece of candy in what it appeared to be a hypnotic trance. One could clearly see how the drool fell off her mouth. Nothing could be heard from the two except the sounds of Kula licking her lollipop. Lick, 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 lick. The blonde girl kept licking her lollipop unaware to anything else. Lick, 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 lick. The girl began to scrounge her face a little, somehow perceiving that someone was looking at her. She paused in her candy consumption and opened an eye to take a glance at the girl in front of her, taking notice of the silly childish face that Chikage had while staring intently at her lollipop. Kula decided not to give it any importance and returned to licking her lollipop. Lick, 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 lick. Kula opened her eye again and looked towards the girl, a year younger than her, in front of her once more. She puzzled for a moment before going back to licking her candy. Lick, 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 lick. Kula stopped once more, and this time she opened both of her eyes and turned towards the smaller girl in front of her. She looked at Chikage, then back at her lollipop before nodding her head as if making a decision. She brought out a bag filled with candies from within the confines of her leather suit and set it in the ground to rummage among its contents. She then pulled a second lollipop and presented it towards Chikage. You want one? She asked, innocently. The little dark-haired girl stood still for a moment in surprise before replying with a shy nod. Yes please, she said, before approaching Kula and taking the offered sweet. Kula then sat on the ground and motioned for Chikage to do the same at her side. Chikage did so without complaint, sticking practically side by side to the older blonde. They both then began to lick on their respective lollipops in contentment. Lick, 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 lick. Kula Diamond vs Chikage Kushinada. Kula Diamond wins friendship. Wham! The massive face faults that followed rattled the entire place up. After all, the people watching witnessed how these two girls carried through with their fight. Ah, Kula has made a new friend, Diana said, gushing at the two girls with such a tender face while she clutched her hands together. Most of Pan's followers that were on the sidelines turned to look at her oddly. They look so cute together, don't you think so? She said, turning towards the closest person to her, which turned out to be Dr. Jackal. The deceptively harmless man just replied with a nod with his ever-present kind smile. Yes, it is certainly a pretty heartwarming scene, Dr. Jackal said in agreement. Pan just shook her head. Kids, damn, seeing all that candy is making me hungry, she said as her stomach grumbled. On the other side of the battlefield, Kushinada wasn't looking at the actions of her foster daughter with kind eyes and prepared to admonish her. Chikage, stop eating that junk. You know you cannot eat anything outside your diet. Toss that thing away and stop fraternizing with the enemy. She began to berate, but a pointed look from Pan that was clearly seen by everyone on the other side of the field shut her up immediately. Never mind, grumbles. On Kanto, the gathered students began to have their own reactions towards these last happenings. I want a lollipop too, Ni-chan. Hanoka wailed, turning towards her big brother with crocodile tears. What? Hanoka, this is no time to eat candies. The fights that are going on right now are too important to ignore. Besides, I have no money with me. I left it all at the camp. And even if I had brought it, where do you want me to look for lollipops? We don't know where they sell those things around here. Kenichi said, crossing his arms. But Nii-chan, I want candies too, Hakafu declared with her own childish outburst. Having heard the siblings' conversation, she turned towards Hanoka and kneeled in front of her. I know where we can get some candies. If you want, I can take you with me and buy you some. She said happily. The eyes of Hanoka began to shine in anticipation. Really? Will you do that for me, Booby-chan? Hakafu just gave a sharp nod. Leave it to me, she declared with a pose and giving a thumbs up and a wink. Yay! Hanoka cried and jumped at the older and curvier girl in a hug. Hakafu returned the show of endearment and took the chance to carry Hanoka in her arms. She turned towards Mew. Come on, you should join us too, she declared before she shifted her hold over Hanoka so she could carry her with a single arm and used the other to grab Mew by the wrist, pulling her along. What? Wait, I don't know if we should. Just hold on for a moment. The fellow blonde said in a very cute and not really effective display of resistance, as the other girl dragged her with her in an impromptu search of candy. Kenichi was simply left there where he was standing, gaping. What the hell just happened? Back with the fights. Mills Lane had moved on to the last battle between unarmed opponents and was about to signal for it to begin. Alright, you're the second last two combatants left of this set of fights, so let's not waste time with pleasantries. I want you to fight until only one of you is left standing. So let's get it on, he said, and finally stepping away and moving on to the last combatants. Yuri Han versus Boris Ivanov. Both warriors assumed a combat stance, Yuri grinning creepily at her opponent. Feel free to cry all you want, little boy. I like it when my victims express how much they love my ministrations, she said as she passed her tongue over her lips and licked them in a disturbing fashion, her fake eyes shining with an ominous violet light. Boris tried not to show it, but he was disturbed by Yuri's display of psychosis. He shook his head to clear his thoughts and steeled himself for the battle to come. Come on, let us begin with this battle, comrade, he said as he prepared to defend himself. Yuri's reply was to lunge herself at Boris with a barrage of kicks. The young soldier managed to block them, but the strength behind them forced him to lose ground against Yuri, who kept pressing forward with her attacks and left his arms feeling numb. Finally, during a spinning kick, Boris managed to grab Yuri by the leg and used her momentum against her by performing a roll and forcing her into the ground with a leg lock, with Boris atop of her twisting her limb and using his knees and his own weight to pin her down. It's useless. The more you resist, the easiest it is for me to break your limb, he declared, with a stoic face. Yuri just let out a small grimace of discomfort. You better let me free, if you know what is good for you. All you're doing is pissing me off. And let me tell you, you don't want to piss me off, she said in a small, quiet, threatening voice, before she used her amazing flexibility to pass her other leg around Boris' neck and began to choke him, forcing him to let her go. Yuri took the opportunity to spin around and drove the young soldier into the ground head first, using the centrifugal force to get back on her feet and leaving her standing with her left leg atop Boris' head, with his face buried in the ground. See, I told you, you didn't want to piss me off, she said cheerily, before she began to jump several times atop his head, kicking him down even more while she laughed like a little girl, an action that became even more painful due to the fact that Yuri was still wearing her 100-pound turtle shell that added to her weight. Yuri squashed his head one last time and rubbed her foot down for good measure before she finally went away with a little girly hop. Boris was left in the ground groaning at his wounds. Mills Lane was finally between the last set of combatants and called them to the center to give his last speech for the moment. Alright, you're the only ones left to be given the signal. I see both of you are armed, so I want to make it clear that there's the possibility that one of you is not going to walk out of here alive, he said, taking glances at Whipswip and Guns, and Sigmarigan's side. If you are willing to accept this, then all I have left to say is that you're both free to do whatever you want in order to win. Do any of you have any objections? Both Whip and Sigmarigan shook their heads no. Then there's nothing more to say but, let's get it on. Mills Lane shouted with his pumping fist before moving away towards the sidelines, having finally finished on giving the go signal to every single one of the battles. Sigmaringen brought his side in front of him and began to lick the blade while he looked at Whip's psychothic eyes. Come sweetie, my side is eager of tasting your blood. Whip just scrounged her face at him in a small scowl before she scoffed. All you're going to taste is the soles of my boots, you creep. She stated as she hit the interior of her left palm with her curled whip. Sigmaringen just snarled at her insult and rushed towards Whip, swinging his scythe in a series of slashes to create a killing arc in front of him. Whip's response was to simply unfurl her whip and stretched it above her head in a stance while she waited for Sigmaringen to get close to her, before she swinged her whip along the ground, hitting Sigmaringen in the feet and tripping him. She immediately followed up with several swings of her whip that hit Sigmaringen full on the back while he was down on the ground. Despite the jacket he was wearing, the whip was giving him lash marks underneath his clothes. Strings shot type C, code, SHOURI. Sigmaringen was left screaming on the ground in pain after Whip finished with her lashes. You bitch. That hurt, he bellowed looking up towards Whip. The young woman didn't like the way the little punk was talking to her, so she swinged her whip again and delivered a lash mark across Sigmaringen's face. The attack shut him up cold and he brought his hands up to cover his injured face. He was left rolling in the ground as his new mark began to bleed. You have a very foul language, Whip said, curling her lips as she brought her weapon back to her with a move of her wrist. I think I'll have to correct that, she declared, lashing her whip at her side for emphasis. Berserker vs. K. 9999. The two combatants kept pummeling at each other, neither of them seemingly bothered by the rain of blows each one was receiving, until finally, it seemed K. 9999 had enough and pushed Berserker away from him with a mighty knee strike. Is that all you have? Come on, show me something more entertaining before I get bored. All this simple punches and kicks are getting old really fast. K. 9999 said, crossing his arms. He then gave an evil grin. If you don't know how to do it, then let me show you. Berserker just looked at his opponent with a scowl. Shut up and keep fighting, he declared before rushing at him again. K. 9999 just looked at him with his grin never leaving his face, before he launched a wave of energy in front of him that hit Berserker in full and struck him 5 times in succession. Each hit kicking a small cloud of dust upwards as the attack kept moving forward. Berserker had been caught off guard by that attack and was left reeling on his feet. ACCHIHEITTEROO. K. 9999 didn't waste time to capitalize on that opening, his grin widening even more. Rarg, he bellowed as he rushed forward towards Berserker, his arm shifting and taking the form of a long pointy drill that began to rev. Berserker instincts warned him of the impending danger. Despite his haze, and he promptly put his arms in front of him to block any attack. K. 9999 drill arm struck him in full and began to rapidly drill a hole through Berserker's left arm, spewing a red mist of blood everywhere. The screams of the blonde young man soon followed. Scree, splosh. God. Berserker jumped away from K. 9999 leaving a trail of blood behind him, clutching his left arm that was hanging limply at his side, a hole of 2 inches of diameter bleeding profusely in the middle. One could see clearly through it. Berserker was panting heavily, trying to keep the pain down. He looked at K. 9999 with shocked eyes. Most of the people who were watching the fight, whether be Yomi, people watching through the live feed or even Pan's followers, were left speechless after witnessing the way the battle escalated so quickly and turned gritty and bloody. It was now more than obvious that this confrontation was a serious affair in which the fighters had the actual risk of losing their lives. In Kanto, Kenichi was reeling from the savage display of violence he had just witnessed. My God, man, I'm so glad Hinoka hasn't returned from her little search of candies. I'm sure Mom and Dad wouldn't want her to witness this. Back at the battle, K-9999 was simply enjoying the way his opponent was now fearful of him after he perfored his arm. He just couldn't stop smiling. What's the matter? Don't tell me you got scared. I'm only just starting, he declared, before he leapt towards Berserker, swinging his arm in front of him and releasing a jet of flame that struck against the blonde brawler in full. Kudagur-u. Berserker tried his best to defend himself with his only good arm, but he couldn't mount a proper defense due to his injuries. The flames pushed him backwards a few steps and left Berserker singed with most of his right arm covered in burns. Now he was injured in both arms. Berserker flinched a little at the pain. Tisk, this may be trouble. He turned to look at K-9999 with a cold stare. I've had enough of you. I will not let myself be defeated like this, he stated before he rushed towards the grinning K-9999 and began to rain down kicks at him. The deranged clone just limited himself to evade the attacks or block them. Sometimes he even let himself hit on purpose just to spice things up. Again with the simple kicks. Come on, do something entertaining already. Surprise me. Berserk suddenly stopped in his attack and turned around, giving his back to his opponent. K-9999 was puzzled by that action. Was his opponent giving up? Why do you turn your back at me? Don't you know it's dangerous to take your eyes off from your opponent? Are you suicidal or something? Do you wish for me to kill you? He said as his arms shifted into a drill once more. Very well, I will fulfill your wish, he stated, as his drill arm reeved again and he lunged at Berserker. But Berserker at the last moment jumped and performed a bicycle kick that struck K-9999 full on top of his head. The hit was so savage that it drove him to the ground with a violent impact. The crazy clone was laughing after that hit. Ha, 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 ha. Now that's what I'm talking about, he stated as he rose up immediately, seemingly no worse for wear. Come on, show me something else. His opponent's brazen attitude was starting to piss Berserker off. I am not your trained monkey to perform tricks for you. Take this battle seriously or I will crush you, he said before he leapt towards his opponent. K-9999 saw him, still with that deranged smile of his plastered on his face. Before he called a stream of red fiery energy to rise from the ground, it covered a circular area around him, hinting at the form of a bubble. The fiery energy traveled upwards several meters into the air and struck Berserker in the middle of his flight. He was knocked out of the air and brought down back into the ground with smoke coming out of his clothes, as he had been crisped by fire once more, and was left on the floor twitching because of his burns. Tasuki, Moon, in, Berserk muttered, trying to move despite his burns. It only helped to aggravate his wounds. He was only successful in managing to assume a kneeling position. K-9999 looked at him with an amused expression. So you still can stand up. Impressive. Sadly, this fight is becoming rather boring, so I'm afraid I'll have to end it right. You should feel honored. I've decided to use one of my secret techniques to end you. Berserker struggled to get back on his feet and managed to do so despite his ankles trembling and threatening to fail him. Shut up. If you're going to attack, then do it already, the blonde said, putting a strong front. K-9999 just smiled even more as he brought his left arm in front of his face. Now, that's the right attitude. You've been a good sport. Here, have your reward, the deranged clone declared, before he began to scream and his arms started to mutate and transform, or so was the intention, because it rather looked as if the limb was imploding upon itself. The disfigured appendix shot itself towards Berserker in a bizarre amalgamation of flesh, cables and circuitry, like some kind of monstrous and abominable giant worm, stretching its length beyond that of a normal human arm. Chikaraga, cat ni, awa. The monstrous arm moved at such a freakish speed, nothing was able to stand in its way. It struck Berserker in full and swept it away before it kept moving on its way unimpeded. The issue with this was that it was going on the direction of the rest of the combatants currently locked on their own fights. K-9999 was laughing like a psychopath while his arm carved a trail of destruction, crushing everything standing on its way. Ryoto and Iori had to jump away the moment they saw the giant misshapen monstrosity coming at them. What the? In the case of Ryoto, he had to leave his wheelchair behind as it was swatted aside by the giant appendix. The gray-haired boy ended up rolling in the ground, and unable to stand back up due to his condition. Remy was the next to move away as the deformed limb threatened to almost swept her away too. Oddly enough, the monstrous arm did its best to swerve away and avoid hitting Angel, leaving the white-haired assassin relatively alone and unharmed. "What the hell is this thing?" yelled an extremely freaked out Remy. For Tirat and Kay, it was pretty easy to avoid the arm's destruction path with a simple backward jump. All that this sudden interruption did for them was a small reprieve from their fight. To Nameless and Kojima, the arm also didn't give them any trouble, as they both had become momentarily separated during the course of their fight. The deformed limb simply passed through the space between them, leaving both fighters puzzled for a moment but otherwise unharmed. Ethan Stanley and Maxima were also forced to dodge the incoming appendix, much to Maxima's annoyance. "Hey, watch it." The arm kept slithering on its way and passed in front of Kula and Chikage. Both girls simply watched the passing of the deformed limb with childish curiosity from where they were sitting while they kept licking their lollipops. Yuri was forced to move away as the arm went straight towards Boris Ivanov as he tried to lift himself up from the floor. The young Russian soldier tried to dive to the side to avoid the limb, but the arm still whiffed very close to him and actually managed to hit him in the face, tossing him aside and knocking him out. Yuri Han versus Boris Ivanov interrupted Boris Ivanov. Yuri was not pleased with this development. "What the fuck? Hey, that was my victim, motherfucker. You cheat me out of my fight," the Korean woman declared in outrage to the high heavens, pissed off by this interruption. The deformed monstrosity managed to get on the way of even Whip and her opponent, even though hers was the furthest battle taking place away from most of the others. Whip used her whip to grab a nearby lamppost and propel herself away from the rampaging arm. Sigmarigan, who was still in the ground, managed to roll away just in time. The arm began to spasm and lash violently to its surroundings, causing further destruction. Berserker was thrown aside and fell to the ground in a broken heap due to the sudden erratic movements. K9999 just kept laughing through all this. He swept his arm in a wide arc towards the rest of the Yami members, who jumped the hell away from their spots to avoid the sudden attack of the crazed clone. The mutated limb kept moving on its course and impacted the side of the building under construction, breaking through anything standing in its way and taking a great chunk off from its base. The entire thing was suddenly covered in a cloud of dust. K9999 didn't seem to want to stop anytime soon. He kept laughing in his deranged state and tried to crush any Yami member he laid his eyes upon. The Yami Grandmasters couldn't retaliate the aggression because of the erratic and sharp lighting fast movements of the misshapen appendici. Finally, Pan had enough. She pointed a finger towards K9999 and a thin ray of energy was launched from her fingertip, impacting pretty close to the crazed clone with the force of a grenade, pulling him out of his frenzy. "That's enough, K9. Stop your insanity before I decide to put you down," she ordered in a tone that brooked no argument. "Yeah, sorry," K9999 said before he called his arm back to him. The entire monstrosity of flesh and circuitry shifted again and all its formless mass went back inside the clone's articulation. Where did all that extra mass go? Who knows? But K9999's arm returned to a normal shape. All the people witnessing this event were outright creeped out by the unnatural abilities displayed by the psychopath clone. Just what did Nests was trying to create in the first place? The Yami Grandmasters were also unnerved. They thought Pan was the only individual they should be wary of. But it appears there are some among her followers with abilities and fig-thing styles so different from their own that even if they were to go all out, there was no guarantee they'd be able to come out on top if push came to shove. This was certainly so outside their initial plans. In Kanto, all of the gathered students were left mouth hanging with horrified expressions on their faces after witnessing such bizarre abilities. It was then that Hakufu appeared, walking in alongside Hinoka and Miu, a bag on candies in the hands of each girl, who were content munching on the sweets. "Hayu, we're back. Did we miss something?" Hakufu asked innocently, looking at the mouth-gaped gathered students as she brought a handful of candies into her mouth. Back on the construction site, A quartet of mysterious men were watching the ensuing battle from the rooftop of a nearby building across the street. Goddamn those pests. Why did they choose to fight in here? They're tearing my workplace apart. They just destroyed the results of 2 months of hard work, said a very big and muscled construction worker with a face of few friends, wearing a construction helmet, jeans and a simple white sleeveless undershirt. Cough, easy brother, do not do anything rash. It seems no one was expecting something like this to happen. I'm sure they'll try to keep the damage to a minimum from now on. Cough cough, do not try to make this a bigger issue than what it needs to be, said a young shoulder-length dark-haired man dressed in simple clothes that appeared to have a cold. They better, or I will go down there and give in a lesson for trashing everything up. The third man, a common-looking office worker with short brown hair and strong chin wearing thick-framed glasses, looked at his left towards the last companion. Who you're calling to? Just some people I know. I have a feeling they would like to be here to see this. A handsome long-haired blonde man wearing a suit said, as he held a cell phone to his ear. The four men turned their attention back to the still raging battles as each one had their own thoughts regarding them. Back with Pan. The young alien girl was not amused by all the destruction created by her subordinate. Normally she wouldn't have cared if he decided to blow the entire place up, but he got too out of control and interrupted the fights of the rest of her minions and almost hoarded all the fun for himself by going after the rest of Yami. Saiyans don't look with good eyes to that kind of selfishness, not to mention how little respect they have for someone who can't control himself and his urges in battle. I hope you're happy with what you've done. You wrecked the entire place up and we almost had to cancel the whole thing because you crashed on the battles of your companions. Very nice done, Pan remarked sarcastically. K-9999 had the decency to look sheepish and rub the back of his head in embarrassment, or maybe it was because he knew Pan would kick his ass if he didn't show deference to her. Oops. K-9999 said lamely. Yuri was not looking kindly at the clone after the stunt he pulled. That bastard ruined my fight. He took out my opponent before I had the chance to enjoy breaking him. Now what I'm supposed to do? Just look at him. He's not getting up any time soon. She raged in a tantrum as she pointed at the unconscious form of Boris Ivanov sprawled on the floor. Pan took a moment to look at the two Yomi disciples that K-9999 had taken out with his mutated arm with an inscrutable face. You and I are going to have words after we are done here, she said to K-9999 with a stare. She then turned towards Yuri. It's all right, Yuri. I promise you will still have a chance to fight. But right now, why don't you go and check on the guy that K-9 was fighting and tell us of his condition? The purple-clad woman let out a sigh before she acquiesced. Fine, but I'm still not pleased with that asshole for ruining my fight, she declared, tossing a last dirty look at the clone before going to fulfill Pan's request. Yuri walked over the broken form of Berserker sprawled on the ground and let out a loud whistle once he saw the condition he was in. Damn, that wacko kid really did a number on him, she exclaimed, impressed. Is he even still alive? Pan called towards her minion with curiosity. Yuri kneeled over Berserker and checked his pulse. Amazingly, yes, he still is somehow. What do you want to do with him? Bring him over here alongside the other guy you were fighting with, Pan ordered. She turned towards K-9999 and pointed at him. And you, come back over here. You've done enough for a single fight. The clone did as he was told, and returned to the lines of Pan's followers, a dejected posture on his walk. Yuri carried the bleeding form of Berserker over her shoulder and then went over where Boris Ivanov was laying. She just grabbed the Russian boy by his foot and dragged him along behind her. She passed in front of Kula and Chikaj, who just looked over the Korean woman walking by them with carefree puzzlement as they kept licking their lollipops. Once she returned to Pan's side, Yuri simply let go of Boris' foot and dropped Berserker like a sack of potatoes in front of Pan so that the alien girl could see his condition with her own eyes. Damn K-9, you really broke him up good, she stated, impressed, looking at the lacerations and bruises that covered the body of Berserker completely, the burns in his right arm, chest and face, and the hole drilled through his other arm. He even had a bleeding contusion on the front of his temple. It was a miracle he was still breathing after getting rammed in full by the misshapen limb of K-9 9999. The violent clone just simply gave her a cheeky smile. Mills Lane coughed to change the conversation and approached Pan. Anyway, seeing how both these fighters are unable to continue, I declare this crazy boy the winner of his fight and cancel the fight of this woman as her opponent was caught as collateral by that last move. And I give a warning not to do that in my presence ever again. Now let's get back to the fights," he declared, trying to put things back on track. Berserker vs. K. 9999 K. 9999 wins KO. Brutality. Pan became aware how everybody was looking at her instead of getting back to their fights. She looked at all of them right back with a pointed stare. "What are you looking at, idiots? You heard the man. Stop staring and get back to your fights," she commanded, and that was enough to get people moving. Iori Yagami vs. Ryoto Asamiya. Once Ryoto heard the signal of continue with their fights, he wasted no time to use his arms to lift his entire body of the ground and propelled himself with a great leap towards where his wheelchair had been tossed. Luckily it was still in optimal conditions, just a little roughed up here and there. Ryoto quickly set it back up again and climbed atop of it before wheeling back towards Iori. "Well then, at least we can return to our battle without further interruptions," Ryoto stated, as he took defense stance and began to go through the motions of his Sikuken. "Agreed," Iori replied, internally impressed at the acrobatic skills of the disabled boy. He got the thought that maybe this fight will not be boring after all. He swiped at Ryoto with his hands poised as claws. The crippled young man blocked his attack easily and retaliated with a punch of his own. Iori blocked the attack too without letting up in his offensive and kept trying to claw at Ryoto, but every single of his attacks were expertly and effortlessly blocked by the ashen-haired boy, who answered in kind with punches of his own that Iori was hard-pressed to block. Some of them even got through, but Iori ignored them and kept pressing on with his attack. "It is useless, you will never be able to get past my Sikuken," Ryoto said, pretty confident. Iori just scoffed at his statement. "We shall say about that," before his fist was caught in a violet fire and he tossed a fiery projectile that traveled through the ground and made Ryoto recoil as he tried to block it. The wheelchair-bound fighter was pushed a couple of steps back, his forearm singed by the blast of fire. 108 Shiki Yami Barai. Iori gave a cruel smirk. "It seems your defense is not as strong as you first thought," he stated mockingly. The demeaning comments ended up pissing Ryoto. "Shut up. I will not let this insult stand," he declared before he sent his wheelchair ramming towards him. Iori kept smiling, and instead of trying to evade the incoming assault he met it head-on. Ryoto believed he was going to meet his attack with one of his own and was prepared to deliver a hit, when Iori dove to a side with a roll at the last moment, allowing him to evade the attack and position himself behind Ryoto. Even though his wheelchair was still moving forwards due to its own momentum, Iori rapidly went after it and caught up to it before he began to deliver a series of clawed strikes at Ryoto's back. He ended his barrage with a last backhanded strike with his hand covered in purple flames as he rose with a jump, lifting his opponent, and struck Ryoto 2 more times with that same motion of his arm as he kept going up, a trail of purple flames marking his ascension. Ryoto was left sailing through the air by this attack away from his wheelchair. 100 Shiki, Oni Yaki. Angel vs. Rimi Kokoron. Rimi got distracted from her own fight, happening a few yards from Ryoto's own, as she saw her love interest being knocked into the air by the rising flaming attack of Iori. Worry began to take a grip on her heart. "Hey, what are you doing? Leave Ryoto-sama alone," she demanded, yelling after Iori. She was brought back to the more immediate concern at hand, as another kick impacted in her abdomen with a loud thunderclap. "Is not a good idea to take your eyes away from our fight, kitty cat. I might end up hurting you badly, cutting my fun short," Angel said with a sing-song voice as he kept pummeling at Rimi with a barrage of punches and kicks before swinging both of her legs in a cartwheel and hitting Rimi with them. State of heat haze. Rimi fell to the ground in pain and looked back at Angel with hate-filled eyes. "That's it. Rimi has had enough of you. Rimi will kill you and then go to help Ryoto-sama," she declared, getting back to her feet again and started running around Angel in a strange way, moving her hands and feet at the same time. Her speed increased dramatically in just a few fractions of seconds, making her really hard to follow for normal human eyes. What do you think of Rimi's Namba Hashiri? Not too easy to hit her now, right? Rimi mocked as she kept running and changing directions unexpectedly without losing speed. She teased her opponent by running into attack range only to get out of it the next moment. Finally she took some distance away from Angel and headed straight towards her. Once she was about to reach her, she tossed a heavy punch while spiraling her arm at incredible speeds. The move created a vacuum of air around her arm, turning it into a veritable drill. If that punch were to land, it was obviously going to cause a lot of damage. Ogata Ryu Hakuda Gekijin. Angel just smirked and ran at Rimi's attack head-on, but just when she was about to ram her outstretched spiraling fist into the angel, the white-haired woman simply disappeared with a black streak, surprising everyone who were watching the battle. What? Rimi asked in surprise, before Angel reappeared again in front of the blonde Lolita-dressed girl and elbowed her right in the face, stopping her cold, and before anyone could react she had disappeared once more only to reappear behind Rimi, tapping the girl's shoulder, who could only turn her head around and look at Angel with a look of utter disbelief. How? Rimi asked with sweat dripping from her forehead as she looked at the way Angel was grinning at her. Beyond frames. You know what's up next, don't you, kitty cat? Angel asked with an evil smile. Rimi just had enough to let out a pitiful groan in dread. Angel just smiled even more, before she stomped the ground, making energy float up with a yellow aura, and punched Rimi in the stomach so hard to make her reach spit and send the blonde girl soaring into the air. The attack was so strong that Angel was pushed back a little by her own strength. Reppun Kamui. Angel immediately followed up by raising her leg into the air in an overhead kick that struck Rimi as she was airborne, making her juggle back up. Shelter from storm. She then raised her arm with her palm open as Rimi was falling back down and struck her right in the face, sending her back into the air once more. Bye-bye Rouge. After that, Angel just kept hitting Rimi with a combination of elbow knee strikes and kicks to keep the black-dressed Lolita girl juggling in the air as if she were her personal soccer ball. Those watching had just to comment on what they were seeing. HMMMPH, it seems Angel is having fun. Look at her, all happy kicking that other girl and keeping her in the air. Pan commented, looking at Angel with an unconcerned expression. Seems she's going to be sleeping well tonight. I didn't know the human body could bounce like that. Nina said, bringing a finger to her delicate chin and tilting her head to a side with an expression of mild interest. Damn it, I need to ask her to teach me how to juggle people like that. It looks fun, Yuri said with a creepy smile. In Kanto, the students were raptly following every single movement of the beating that Rimi was receiving. Ouch, that looks painful, Takeda said with a wince. Kasara looked down and began to feel her legs. I wonder if I could do something like that. Hakafu, Mew, Hinoka, Apache, Shiger and Tachomaru were bobbing their heads up and down, following each of Rimi's bounces. That is until Mew had enough and put both of her hands at the sides of her head with a silly expression on her face. Ah, I'm getting dizzy just by watching it, she said with both of her eyes turning into spirals. Appa, ball girl makes Apache dizzy, the big Muay Thai grandmaster said in agreement with his own silly dizzy expression. Back on the fight. Angel had enough of kicking Rimi around like a soccer ball. After all, she didn't want to break her just yet, so she dedicated how she was going to end her combo. She delivered a high kick into the air and hit Rimi twice with that same leg, lifting the Lolita again to put her into position. Senseless fists. Angel let Rimi finally fall on piece without attacking her anymore, but just as she was about to touch ground, Angel picked her off the air, grabbing her by the head. Rimi was in a too bad condition to do anything but hang limply in Angel's grasp, her body covered in cuts and bruises and her dress ripped in some sections. Angel continued with her attack by delivering a knee strike right into Rimi's abdomen that sent her soaring into the air one last time, but this time she was sent flying into the distance, away from the white-haired woman. Mad Murder Roulette. Rimi's body flew across several yards before finally heading back into the ground. It was at that moment that Angel decided to deliver her finishing move. She quickly dashed towards her and disappeared altogether from all sight, only to reappear back right on top of Rimi. Angel snatched the falling girl off the air, grabbing her by the neck with her legs in a submission hold, and brought her with herself as she lay on her back on the ground, before snapping her legs open, almost breaking Rimi's neck and tossing her aside like a broken doll. Red Sky of Japonesia. Rimi groaned in pain, but tried to stand back up despite her injuries. She only managed to get on her hands and knees before her body spasmed due to her injuries and she began to cough blood. She brought a hand to her mouth until she calmed down and then stared incredulously at her own blood dripping from her hand. She slowly turned to look at Angel with an expression of utter dread and disbelief. The white-haired assassin just kept smiling sweetly at her. 2. Iori Yagami vs Ryoto Asamiya. Ryoto didn't wasted time to recover himself after Iori sent him into the air. He spinned around and landed with his hands and used them to leap back at his wheelchair once more and landing back into it in a sitting position. I see I'm going to need my best techniques in order to defeat you, Ryoto said as he expanded his inner eye to the maximum for his next attack. Iori just smiled as he let a purple flame burn inside his fist. Let's see them then, he said before launching another ground-traveling fire projectile at Ryoto. 108 Shiki, Yami Barai. Ryoto watched the projectile coming in fast at him, and then he pulled his wheelchair up from underneath the seat with a mighty heave and somersaulted over the purple flame, bringing the whole thing with him and landed in front of Iori, no worse for wear, while the redhead had a look of utter shock after what he had just witnessed. Ryoto then began to deliver a series of rapid and powerful palm strikes at Iori that landed with 100% of accuracy in weak spots all over his body. The flame wielder tried to block the strikes raining down on him but failed every single time. Gungir. Iori was left helpless under the relenting assault of the crippled boy. He tried to block, dodge and evade the barrage that was raining down on him, but all his efforts proved fruitless. Ryoto felt himself sure in his victory. See, there's nothing you can do to escape my attack. The techniques gained from my knowledge in ancient martial arts make me invincible. Die already, he declared as he launched on last punch to end his opponent. Against all odds, Iori caught that punch with his hand, enveloping Ryoto's with his palm. The ashen-haired boy was left speechless, unable to comprehend how his attack failed. What? Iori just looked at him with a stoic expression, a bloodied bruise at the corner of his mouth. You say that your knowledge of ancient martial arts makes you invincible. Fool, few can compare in age with the Yagami style of martial arts. There's no way that your puny techniques will defeat 2,500 years of heritage so easily, he said as his hand was caught on fire once more, surrounding and burning Ryoto's fists that was still caught inside Iori's grasp. Ryoto could only grind his teeth trying to contain his pain, as he squirmed under the redhead's unforgiving hold. Iori then put his other hand above Ryoto's head, grabbing him, and slammed him violently into the ground to then blast him with a surge of purple fire that left Ryoto writhing in pain. 212 Shiki, Kototsukin. Iori grabbed and pulled Ryoto off the ground and brought the ashen-haired boy at eye level with him before continuing to punish him with a quick combination of claw and knee strikes. He then began to slash away at him with his forearms while sliding forward, hitting him 2 times and sending Ryoto up into the air at the second hit. Only for Iori to go after him and intercept him with a double axe handle to the head, sending Ryoto diving back into the ground. 127 Shiki, Awahana. As Ryoto tried to lift himself back with his elbows, Iori just looked down at him impassively. Be ready, he warned. Ryoto could only look up at him in shock before Iori lifted him up with a kick. He then released his ki by doing a quick pose, lifting his arm up while using the other as support on the forearm, before he rushed forward and intercepted Ryoto with a flurry of fast clawed strikes and scratches that began to cut Ryoto and make him bleed. He finished his attack by catching Ryoto on an embrace and blasting him off with a small explosion of purple flames, sending the crippled boy crumbling back into the ground. Kin 1211 Shiki, Yaotome. Ryoto rolled on his back despite the immense pain to look at Iori with something that appeared to be respect. It seemed he had found a real warrior with skills better than his own. Ethan Stanley vs Maxima. Maxima cracked his knuckles and popped his neck before signaling Ethan to resume the fight. Come on kid, let's do this. I don't have time to stand in here all day. If you don't attack me, I'm going to attack you, the cyborg super soldier said with a mildly bored expression. Ethan just grinded his teeth in impotent exasperation. He knew he was not going to be able to defeat Maxima through normal means, as he had already proven to be immune to his pressure points attacks, and he doubted he could surpass on a test of pure physical strength too. But seeing as there was no other choice, fine. Let us be done with this, already. Maxima cracked a grin. Alright, that's the spirit. Tell you what, I'll even let you go first, so go ahead. Hit me with the best you got. Ethan didn't need any more incentive and lunged at Maxima head-on with a fast straight double knife strike that impacted right in the middle of Maxima's chest, who didn't even blink at the strike. Snake stance. Ethan followed up with a powerful straight high kick towards Maxima's head, who again wasn't even frazzled by the attack. Marharshiva kick. Finally, Ethan charged straight at the cyborg with his shoulder. Boar stance. He impacted into Maxima's chest in full, but he didn't even manage to move him a millimeter. Ethan could only sweat drop as Maxima looked down at him with a blank face. So it is true, Pan's new upgrades have indeed increased my performance way beyond my previous limits. Maxima mused half absent-mindedly. Wah, what? Ethan asked with strong dread, seeing how all his attacks had been totally useless to even ruffle the cyborg's clothes. Oh, sorry, I was lost in my thoughts. You see, after Pan discovered I was a cyborg, she decided to work and upgrade my systems so that they could be on level with the ones of the cyborgs on her planet. She said she's going to model mine like those of a cyborg she knows named 16, but she also said she wants to give me some of the abilities and scanning parameters that her little robot Giru has. She only just began to apply these new modifications on me a few days ago, but I can already feel a tremendous improvement already. I can't even imagine how powerful I'm going to be once she's done. Maxima said with a smile. Oh, but where are my manners? We have a fight to finish. Let's see, let me take some readings to see how much power I will need to defeat you without killing you. Maxima said as his eyes were covered by small holographic displays showing him scanning information and power inputs. Ah yes, this should be enough, he declared in satisfaction after a couple seconds. In less than it takes to blink, Maxima struck Ethan in the chest with a powerful straight punch that released a trail of vapor around his fist. The impact sent Ethan flying at least a dozen yards towards the interior of the building under construction, where he went straight through several walls before stopping and falling to the ground unconscious. Suffice to say, most of the people watching were left flabbergasted at that feat. M4 Vapor Cannon. After that impressive display of strength, Maxima was left staring at his fist, that was still releasing vapor, with a sheepish look on his face. Oops, I think I overdid it a little. I still haven't gotten used to these new power settings, he said as he brought his other hand to scratch the top of his head. Ethan Stanley vs Maxima. Maxima wins. KO. Damn Pan. Those new upgrades you've been giving Maxima are certainly pretty impressive, Foxy said with a whistle, honestly impressed at the improvements the alien girl had been giving to the cyborg super soldier. Pan simply replied with a scoff. Please, that was nothing. I've only begun to upgrade his systems a short few of days ago and haven't had much time to work on him since I too have been working in upgrading Candy's systems. I have only been able to apply around 10% of the modifications I have in mind. Just you wait, by the time I'm done with him, those two are going to be the more powerful beings on Earth right after me, she stated with utmost certainty. Her followers could only turn to look at her with stunned expressions. In the end they simply shake their heads and decided to drop the matter. Sometimes, they can't help but wonder what the hell they got into when they accepted to follow the strange girl from another world. Fall of Yami Round 2 Part 2K. vs Tira at Koken. Both combatants stared at each other after spending some time countering each other on their attacks to assess each other's skills. I can tell you're a calm and calculating person just like me, Tira said, speaking for the first time during their combat. But after analyzing your combat skills during our little blow exchange, I have calculated with 0% margin of error that your abilities are nowhere near enough to defeat me, he stated with a grin, trying to goad the other bronze-skinned fighter. K just replied with an amused grin of his own. Is this all you have to say after finally daring to open your mouth, to speak only stupidities? You should have remained silent then. Surely you don't expect what meager skills I have showed you, are everything I have in my repertoire," he said, taking a laid-back stance and making a flame burn inside his open palm. The comment made Tirat frown a little, certainly not AP reactiating that comment. "It does not matter regardless, your little parlor tricks will not be enough to save you. You're still not good enough to defeat me," he stated, reinforcing his Tangard Mei stance. K just chuckled in amusement. "Care to test that theory?" Koken just stared at K with a dark look before dropping his guard and letting himself open to any attack. He motioned to his opponent to come at him. "Come at me, if you dare." K was left puzzled momentarily by his opponent's sudden recklessness. He set aside any misgivings he may have with a shake of his head and focused on the matter at hand. Without further invitation, K rushed at Tirat, releasing a circle of flames in front of him to attack the blonde bronze fighter. Ein trigger. But Tirat didn't remain idle and confronted the flames head-on by rushing forwards with a knee strike aimed at K's chest. He went through the wall of fire, receiving only minor burns, and caught the fellow bronze fighter off guard. Yan Erawan. But just as his knee was about to connect, K disappeared from Tirat's sight altogether, leaving the young Muay Thai practitioner confused until he saw him standing further away in front of him. Tirat couldn't imagine how he was able to move that fast just when his hit was at mere millimeters from hitting. The people watching from the sidelines knew that answer, as they had clearly seen K teleporting while sliding through the ground to get away from Tirat's attack. It did not bode well for the disciple of Agard Jumsai to face an opponent that could avoid his hits by teleporting around. Blackout. K just smiled at Tirat's perplexed expression, before leaping at him with a flying kick that quickly traversed the distance between them and forced Tirat to block with both hands due to the strength behind that kick. Minute spike. Before Tirat could retaliate, K followed up by sliding through the ground forwards and kicking Tirat on his ankles, making him to drop his guard and leaving him open to further attacks. Narrow spike. K then followed up with a rising uppercut that left a trail of fire behind him and sent Tirat into the air, with K following close behind. Crow bites. K then performed an overhead flame kick while in the air that struck Tirat in full and knocked him back into the ground hard enough to crack the pavement. Secondary bites. Tirat was left on the ground groaning at his wounds. He didn't remain down for long and stood back up once more. He raised up his guard again and began to circle around K warily. "What's the matter? Didn't you had stated how you were going to win this battle easily?" "Not so confident about that anymore. It seems we now know who of the two of us has no skill," K said mockingly, putting his hands inside his pockets and assuming an unguarded laid-back pose. That comment managed to piss Tirat off. "Shut up. I'll show you how much more skilled I am than you," he declared before rushing at K with an elbow strike. The white-haired bronze man simply counteracted that move by turning to a side and avoiding that hit without taking his hands of his pockets. But Tirat wasn't done yet. He drew closer to K until he was practically bumping with him, getting inside his personal spaces to not allow him to mount a proper defense, and delivered a sideways elbow strike towards K head with enough strength to break his neck. Hiran Muon Pandi. But just like before, K simply disappeared from the spot he was standing, passing through Tirat and getting behind him, still with his hands in his pockets. He had once more teleported to avoid the blonde Muay Thai fighter attack. Tirat was again caught by surprise by that technique, but his surprise didn't lasted for long as his senses warned him on the danger behind him, so he automatically launched a backwards elbow strike behind him to hit his ambusher. The attack forced K to finally take his hands off his pockets in order to block the strike. Ti soak clab. K tried to retaliate with a hook, but Tirat ducked underneath the punch and launched an elbow up towards K's head from his crouching position, forcing the white-haired bronze fighter into the defensive once more. Say Reu ran. Tirat then launched a knee strike into K's abdomen that the fire user was forced to block, but that was only a feint to lower K's defenses for his next move. Tirat leapt at K, launching a knee strike and a double elbow strike at the same time, with the intention of squashing K's head between the two simultaneous attacks by striking him under the chin and the top of his head. Hak Ko Erawan. But once more, the advantage given to K by his abilities were hard to overcome for the blonde bronze skin fighter, as his prey disappeared again with a quick translocation and positioned himself behind Tirad for a second time. Unlike last time, he was not in a position to counter against any possible threat, as he was caught in the momentum of his own attack. K just smirked as he began to deliver a quick combination of punches and kicks at the back of the helpless, still airborne, Tirad, leaving him unable to counteract any attack and at the mercy of K's follow-ups as he delivered another stream of fire that struck Tirad in full and sent him flying away. Ein Trigger. K kept up on the offensive by kicking the wall of fire, still burning in front of him, and sending a fireball that struck and intercepted Tirad as he was falling back down. Second shoot. As Tirad was falling once more, K pulled out his sunglasses from inside his jacket and tossed them at the Muay Thai practitioner, striking him as his body was touching the ground, leaving him ramrod and paralyzed in the spot. The sunglasses bounced from Tirad after hitting him and back to K, who catched them with his gloved hand and then took the time to open them and put them on with that same hand as Tirad remained frozen in his spot. "Wah, what is happening?" asked a very puzzled Tirad in dread. "This is the end," said a laid-back K, wearing his sunglasses, before he disappeared from all sight and reapered with his fist smashing in Tirad's face. The white-haired bronze figure then unleashed a long and brutal combination of fast and hard punches and kicks that pummeled Tirad until almost unconscious. If he were not frozen to his spot, the blonde bronze fighter would have kissed the ground already. After delivering his brutal beating, K ended his attack by connecting one last 1-inch punch into Tirad's sternum, fracturing his ribcage and pushing the Muay Thai practitioner back before sending him skidding to the ground. "Chain drive, and that will be all," K stated, putting back one hand inside his pockets while using the other to push back some strands of hair from his eyes. He then turned his back at the beating from of Tirad and was about to walk away back with the others, when he heard a groan coming from behind him. He turned his attention back to Tirad to see the bruised and bleeding Muay Thai practitioner getting back on his knees as he was trying to stand back up again, clutching his chest, despite the protests of his arms and injuries. He began to vomit blood in a violent fashion, soaking his entire chin with his own vital liquid before it trailed down his neck and over his chest, making for a rather gruesome sight. "Huh, you can still stand up. Impressive, though useless. You must now be aware of the great gap between our levels. Why are you still intent on fighting me, knowing how much out of your league I am?" K inquired with a nonchalant pose and attitude. "That may be true, but how could I call myself a martial artist if I gave up so easily? When I accepted to walk this path, I knew there'll be times when I had to risk life and limb in order to achieve victory. Only by defeating stronger opponents will I prove the superiority of my art," Tirad said, getting back up despite the protests of his body, his shaky legs seemingly to be about to fail under the weight of his own body at any moment. He assumed a combat stance once more and prepared to do battle with K once more. K just looked at him with an unconcerned expression before shrugging his shoulders. "Fine, if you want me so bad to beat you, who am I to deny your wishes?" He got in position by facing towards Tirad, standing nonchalantly with a hand inside his pocket and the other with a flame burning inside his palm. "Come at me whenever you're ready," he said to Tirad, pretty laid back. The blonde bronze-skinned fighter just looked at him with a grim dark expression for a moment, before rushing and leaping at him with a flying knee strike towards K's head. Gemon Tepi. K just looked at his opponent and waited for when he reached the highest altitude of his jump, still holding the burning flame inside his hand, before teleporting forwards to meet Tirad's attack with a massive flaming straight punch that broke through Tirad's knee strike and struck him in the abdomen in full, blowing him away with such violence that he ended up skidding through the ground for several yards, breaking the ground before coming to a stop. Tirad knocked out for the count. Heat drive. Mills Lane got closer to assess Tirad's condition and call the winner. "He's knocked out. The winner of this match is the remarkably fashionable fellow over here," he said, motioning towards K with one arm. K just huffed in contempt and made a pose by lifting his gloved fist up in the air, pushing his chest forward, making his bronze pectorals show through his unbuttoned upper part of his jacket while still wearing his sunglasses. There was never any doubt about the outcome of this fight, he declared with a roguish smirk. K vs Tirad Koken. K Wins KO. Obviously, Pan and her followers had to comment about the last fight. Stylish motherfucker, Yuri said, with her arms crossed. I've never seen someone kicking so much ass and looking so good while at it. He has skills, that's for sure. Pan granted, tilting her head left and right slightly. She had to admit that Kay had looked pretty cool while fighting. If she still were to have the same girly mindset she had when she used to go on shopping trips with Bra, she would have been swooning after Kay, with hearts on her eyes like a regular teenager. Thank God Gran had decided to reinstate her training and forced her out of that phase, otherwise right now she would have lost face and embarrass herself in front of her minions by drooling after Kay. Still, he had looked pretty cool and yummy. Pan thought as she tried to hide a blush. In Kanto, that was exactly the sort of thing that was happening among most of the female population of the gathered students' armies. So cool. A blue-haired girl wearing a white eye patch named Shime Ryomu remarks as she tries to contain a blush while pressing her hands to her face. Ryabi could feel a trick of blood running down her nose on her stupefied face. She wiped it off with her hand and looked at the red smear staining her fingers. Well, at least this proves I'm not a lesbian, she stated with a cheeky grin. Her friends and bodyguards around her didn't pay any attention to her antics, them too unable to take their eyes from Kay, as their faces burned crimson due to the intense blushes they were sporting and their stares turning vacant as their minds began to be filled with fantasies regarding the with-haired bronze-skinned figure. Even the girls from the Shinpaku Alliance side were mesmerized by Kay's sex appeal. Kasara had brought her cap down to cover her burning face as she struggled to rain her blush down. Even Freya was not immune to those strong charms as one could clearly how bothered she was, closing her eyes with a flushed while she mumbled a mantra to herself, trying to recompose her cool and having a hard time trying to achieve it. Must be loyal to Yukita, must be loyal to Yukita, must be loyal to Yukita. Behind her, her Valkyries were openly drooling after Kay, with stunned stupid expressions on their faces. Back to the battles. Whip vs Sigmaringen. The punk-dressed side-wielder finally managed to get up after receiving the lashes SE delivered by Whip and evading the destructive rampage of K. 9999 arm. His face bare for all to see, scarred by the lash mark that had cut his face diagonally from end to end. You goddamn bitch, I will kill you for marring my face, he declared as his mind was being overtaken by rage against the woman that had given him his new scar. Whip just looked at the punk youth with a blank face as she curled her whip with one hand while she rested the other above the grip of her knife currently inside its sheath attached to the back of her belt. Stop talking and get on with the fight, otherwise get the hell out of here and stop wasting my time, she replied in a harsh, uncaring tone. Her blatant dismissal just pissed Sigmaringen even more, who rushed at her in blind rage and swinging his scythe to try to cut her apart. Whip's answer to such aggression was to simply launch her whip on a horizontal swipe at the incoming Sigmaringen, her whip snapping with a loud and leathery crack that resonated through the entire place. Whip shot. Sigmaringen was forced to stop on his tracks and block that strike due to the strength behind that lash, his scythe rattling strongly on his grip. He managed to successfully block that strike before again rushing with all his speed towards the young woman, knowing that remaining idle in one spot would only make him prey against further lashes from Whip. His assumption proved to be right on the spot, as Whip already had retracted her weapon with a simply flick of her wrist and was ready to deliver further punishment. She did a quick pose by stretching her whip over her head once more and lashed it at Sigmaringen again. The leather-clad punk again raised his scythe to block the incoming attack, thinking to be one similar like the one before. He was greatly surprised to discover that rather than the whip to hit him in full, it bypassed his defenses by swerving to a side towards his arm and latching itself around his shoulders, trapping him completely, before Whip pulled him with great force towards her. Strings shot type B, code, Chikara. With a single movement of her wrist, Whip brought Sigmaringen close to her and detached her whip from him, leaving him reeling a little due to the sudden and strong yank and making his scythe useless due to the close proximity. She then began to deliver another flurry of lashes upon the helpless Sigmaringen before pulling out her knife and slashing at him in the leg and then keeping up in the attack by spinning the knife between her fingers and delivering an upward swipe, slashing Sigmaringen several times due to the spinning motion of her knife and giving him new cuts on his face to match his lash mark. Bitch. Sigmaringen yelled as he brought his hands to his face again and turned his back to Whip, a very stupid move. The young clone took the chance to assume a quick pose and deliver a long series of lashes that struck Sigmaringen full in the back at a fast pace, the speed of her attacks being outstandingly high, hitting both of her sides in succession by making circular motions with her wrist. The strong lashes began rip through his jacket and cut into his skin, turning the young punk's back into a bleeding mess, his screams ringing oudly for all to hear. After the long punishment, Sigmaringen was sent flying away and falling into the ground. He could only let out a pitiful groan as he could barely move after receiving such cruel attack. All he could do was remain bleeding in the ground. Sonic Slaughter. Code KW. Time to end this, Whip declared before walking towards Sigmaringen until she was standing right in front of his slumped body, before she pulled out her Desert Eagle and shot him twice on his kneecaps. Bang, bang, RRRRRRRRRRRRRGH. Desert Eagle, you whore, you shot me, Sigmaringen cried as he clutched his busted and bleeding kneecaps that had become nothing more than 2 holes from which his vital fluid was escaping in floods. He rolled in the ground in pain, making for a very pitiful and pathetic sight. Whip just frowned as the barrel of her gun was still smoking. My God, you just don't know when to shut up, she commented, before shooting him again, this time in the arms, crippling Sigmaringen completely and for all intents and purposes leaving him unable to keep fighting. Bang, bang, Fuck. Most of Pan's followers were sweat dropping at the scene. You seriously just shot him? Why? Yuri called, gaping a little. This is an armed combat, isn't it? It's not my fault this idiot didn't specify if certain types of weapons were forbidden for our duel. I mean, why should I waste my time having a fair fight with this annoying git when I can simply shoot him and be done with it? Whip stated as she checked her weapon unconcerned. He's the one who wanted to have an armed combat without wearing any kind of protection. I mean, I can see from here that his master is wearing Kevlar. Why he didn't follow his master's example goes beyond me. You can't expect all of your enemies to fight fair, especially in a battle without rules. The people hearing her explanation had to agree she had a point. Even the Yami masters conceded she was right, as they themselves have taken measures to protect themselves against firearms. Some of them wear armor. Others have techniques that allow them to withstand against a hail of bullets. Others, like Kushinada, are fast enough to clear a whole room full of enemies before they have the chance to pull their triggers. Ishinsai is able to trick and confuse his opponents in order to evade their shots. But it seems that Stilve, in all his short-tempered wisdom, didn't teach to his student anyway to counteract bullets or even sidestepping them due to his complete inability of evading any kind of attack. All the Yami masters turned to give the usual reckless bloodthirsty side wielder a cussing stares. What? Sigmaringen kept trashing on the floor, cursing the woman who injured him. You fucking slut. I will cut your tits off for what you've done to me, you hear me? I will gut you like I fish and strangle you with your own intestines. You better watch it, because the moment I'm able to move again I will murder you. You will not be able to escape from my revenge. He raged under great pain. Whip just huffed before turning her back to the fallen punk and addressed Pan with a whining tone. Pan, do I have to bring this jerk back with me? I don't want him to be part of our group. He's only going to be annoying me and giving me headaches. Hey bitch, don't you fucking ignore me while I'm talking to you or I'll kill you. Raged the affronted Sigmaringen from behind Whip. See, this is what I'm talking about, Whip exclaimed, motioning behind her towards the fallen punk. Pan acquired a thoughtful pose and began to mull over the situation. Well, I suppose if you want to get rid of him you should either kill him or drop him off somewhere. Though I would advise you to take the first option, as I can tell he is not going to stop hounding you unless you deal with him permanently. The fuck you're talking about? The punk said, being pointedly ignored by the two girls. Whip brought a finger to her chin in thought. I don't know. I mean, I have no qualms about killing, but to execute him on live TV. I don't think I want to deal with all the heat and action like that would give me. The young clone stated with a helpless shrug. Her reply left Pan musing over her words. You're probably right, people are sure to complain if we start executing defeated opponents on live feeds. It's not as if I care what people think about me, seeing as I can practically destroy this planet if I get pissed enough. but I don't want people nagging me wherever I go for being a soulless bitch. The alien girl stated, thinking things through. Fuck you, wenches. Don't speak of me as if I weren't here. I'll shove my scythe down your asses and cut you two open from the inside. I'll kill the both of you. You first, little whore of the whip, and then that alien harlot you take orders from. Sigmaringen screamed in a rage. If he were to be thinking straight, he should had realized how a bad idea it was to piss off Pan. But as it is, since he's just the same as his master, a bloodlusted psycho that can't get off with anything that isn't violence, he made a very stupid mistake. Pan just frowned at the fallen bleeding punk that was insulting her. Did this little weakling called me a harlot? She asked in a low, calm tone of voice that warned of imminent danger. Yuri, Nina, Mature, Vice and Foxy, who were standing at her sides, discreetly took several steps back away from her, knowing Mount Vesuvius was about to make eruption. The sound of Pan's jaw tightening sealed Sigmaringen's fate. Okay, screw it. Let's kill the little shit. I don't care what public opinion will be anymore. Here, I'll do it myself. She declared as she stretched her arm and pointed her open palm at Sigmaringen, before releasing a bright energy blast that struck the bleeding punk in full, eliciting a painful scream as result, and engulfed the maniac punk totally before he was swept away by the high concentration of energy and leaving nothing behind but a scorch mark in the ground where Sigmaringen used to be. The people watching were obviously alarmed by Pan's reaction, especially Whip, as the ray of energy had brushed very close past her. Holy fuck, what the hell was that? Pan, what did you do to him? She asked, jumping in surprise, before taking a glance to inspect the scorch mark that covered the spot where the punk used to be. I just atomized him with one of my energy blasts. I figured it would be the best way to get rid of that annoyance, as it is less likely to offend other people's sensibilities due to not being a gruesome form of execution, nor does it leave a mess that would need to be cleaned up because it doesn't leave any single trace of the target behind. Pan explained with a shrug. The people watching were just simply horrified that Pan has the power to erase any trace of someone from existence with just a small blast of energy. As if her ability to launch nuclear blasts with her hands wasn't terrifying enough. Whip shuddered in her spot for a moment, thinking how morbid was that. All what remained of the insufferable punk was this small blackened patch on the ground. If you're done already, then get back in here, Pan said towards Whip to pull her out of her stupor. Quote ellipsis dot. Yeah, right, Whip replied before returning to the lines of Pan's followers. Mills Lane just stared from where he was standing. Damn, I don't need to go over there to know that rebel boy ain't going to be riding his bike into the sunset no more. Whip vs Sigmaringen. Whip wins fatality. Kojima Satomi vs Nameless. Satomi was pacing around Nameless, keeping his guard up, a serious expression in his face. His little previous slip while trying to goad Nameless into attacking him recklessly had backfired spectacularly, as the blue-haired white-streaked clone was not in the mood for trash talk and began to assault him with a rain of fiery projectiles that he had been hard-pressed to dodge, as trying to block the burning flames was not a viable option, as the burns in his arms can attest to that. Nameless then engaged in a contest of physical strength, the young clone proving to be a dangerous opponent even without his flame attacks, as Satomi found himself unable to match his speed or strength despite the difference in size and bulk between them. Kojima forcibly learned that Nameless is not an enemy that he should underestimate. I must congratulate you, you have proven to be a strong opponent, enough that I see myself in the need of using my most powerful techniques in order to defeat you, Satomi declared honestly, looking at Nameless with respect. I care not for your accolades, stop talking and get on with the fight. Nameless replied without lowering his guard. The one-eyed young man just smirked as a reply. As you wish, he let go of his fighting stance and began to perform strange hand seals with his fingers. As I had said, you have proved to be a very strong opponent, but I have ways to close the gap between us, he said, before blasting towards Nameless and delivering a tremendous kick that, even though Nameless was able to block it, the strength behind it caught him off guard. What? Nameless thought in surprise, as he was sent into the air due to the powerful force behind that kick, before Kojima jumped after him and delivered a second kick with an impressive speed that rivaled his own. The great strength behind that attack managed to break through his defenses and struck him in the chest, sending him back into the ground with great violence. INSOU double kick seal. Nameless managed to land on his feet despite the great force of the attack, his feet dragging through the ground and leaving a trail marking his passing. Once he stopped, he clutched the side where the hit had connected in pain and tried to assess this new development. How is it that your strength increased so much in just a few moments? You were not that powerful before. Nameless asked, honestly curious, wanting to know how his opponent's abilities increased so sharply in such a short time. Satomi just kept smirking as he explained his technique. Thanks to the techniques teaching to me by my sensei, I'm able to increase my physical prowess. By performing this seal with my hands, I can tense up my arms in a special allow that allow my legs to kick and move with at least thrice my normal speed and strength. Nameless tilted his head to a side, recognizing the usefulness of such a technique. Impressive, but I will not be defeated so easily despite this new trick, he declared and prepared to continue fighting. We'll see, Kojima said, before crouching down on his nest and pouncing towards Nameless with great force while spiraling through the air and stretching his arms up front towards his opponent like a giant flying drill. Thousand Tree Wheel. Nameless didn't even blink at the oncoming attack, limiting himself only to stare at it with a disdainful glare. Fool, you'll need more than that if you wish to defeat me, he declared, before slamming his arms violently in the ground and releasing a huge blood-red flame that rose from underneath his hands and began to engulf him completely, intercepting the incoming Kojima and knocking him away from Nameless, sending him crashing heavily on the ground with high-degree burns all around his body. The eye patch-wearing fighter could only twitch on the ground in pain, unable to move due to his burns. Senku Katame Shutu Ugi Yaku Utori. The shield of flames opened up and faded away, revealing an unharmed Nameless. Let's see if you have something better than that, he declared derisively. Kojima could only grunt over his failure. Tisk, damn it. Pan and her group turned to look over Kula and Chikage. The two girls were still resting in the ground enjoying their candies. The gathered group of battle-hardened fighters let out a collective sweat drop at witnessing that scene. Mature was the first to speak by addressing Pan. Excuse me, mistress, but, are you going to leave those two there doing nothing? Those who were called forward were supposed to fight against an opponent from Yami, and technically speaking, Kula has yet to battle anyone. She pointed out, raising a finger, trying to call the attention of her new ridiculously powerful and whimsy boss. Pan began to ponder on that thought, holding her chin between her thumb and index finger with one hand. You know, you're right, Kula has yet to fight anyone. Her battle with the other kid didn't even took place. We should tell the guys of Yami to send us another of their apprentices, one that is less likely to ditch a fight for whatever reason. But first, let me ask Kula what she thinks. Pan turned to the little leather-clad blonde. Yo, Kula, do you still want to fight? We can't have you sitting there doing nothing without you having proved your worth first. Said young blonde stopped licking her lollipop for a moment and tilted her head to a side in thought with a cute expression of wonderment. MMMPH, yes, okay I guess. She replied in affirmative. Very well. She turned to look towards the gathered Yami masters on the other side of the construction site and called at them with a yell that was heard throughout the entire place. Hey, you idiots over there, send someone else. Who can fight against Kula. She still hasn't fought yet. Most of the gathered grandmasters didn't appreciate the way the alien girl addressed them, but complied with her wishes anyway, knowing it would be foolish not to do so. Okay, which of the apprentices we should send to deal with that little girl? Senzui asked towards his companions. It was Kushinada who first replied. Since most of our own apprentices are currently engaged with their own battles, we should send one from the armed division. True, they pretty weaker compared to us, but I'm sure they are capable enough to handle one little girl, she said with mocking haughtiness. The Hachio executionary blade did not take kindly to Kushinada's words, but they had to endure them without complaint, knowing they were indeed much weaker compared to her. After a few moments of deliberations, it was decided that Yui Sayama would be sent as Kula's next opponent. Very well, I'll carry with your orders, masters. The calm girl replied with a slight bow and an unexpressive face. She went to stand on the other side opposite to Kula. Yo, Mills, come over here. We have another fight about to take place. Pan called towards the senior referee. Said referee promptly came mumbling under his breath, something about unrespectful children. He stood between the two girls and called them forth. All right, sweethearts, get over here. Kula replied with a nod and turned towards Chikage, offering her lollipop at her. Here, hold this for me, okay. Chikage replied with a nod before grabbing the sweet with her other hand. With that done, Kula stood up and went to meet her new opponent. Diana approached the still sitting Chikage with a smile. Come over here, sweetie, let us give Kula room enough to fight. She said sweetly, taking Chikage by the wrist and gently leading her towards the rest of Pan's followers, the little girl complying without any fuss. Mills Lane addressed both girls. Okay, here we are again. Personally, I would not have let you two fight under these conditions, especially seeing how one of you is armed and the other is not. But I don't have much say in this matter, seeing I'm little more than an unwilling hostage. Oh well, here are the rules. You fight until one of you is unable to continue, lethal moves. I would prefer if this fight did not end with one of you being rushed inside an ER, but since it's out of my hands, it would be left to your own discretion whether you try to kill your opponent or not. Alright, let's get it on. He declared with his usual pumped fist before moving away to give space to the girls to do battle. Kula Diamond vs Yui Sayama. Before any of the girls got into a fake thing stance, Kula waved at her opponent with a cute and happy greeting. Hi, I'm Kula, let's have a good time. She said smiling. Yui wordlessly and stoically pulled out her katana from her sheath, and lunged at Kula, attempting to cut the small blonde in half with a fast slash. The calm and collected girl was surprised when the image of Kula simply disappeared. That was rude. You didn't even reply to my greeting. A pouting Kula said, crossing her arms from behind Yui. The eyes of the usual collected girl widened in surprise after seeing her attack being dodged with such ease. You meanie, I was going to ask you to be my friend. The small blonde kept ranting in a cute tantrum. Yui didn't deem herself to answer and kept attacking the younger girl while she was distracted, but once more just when she was about to land her blow, Kula's image simply seemed to vanish. The people watching from afar could see how Kula was able to dodge Yui's slashes by dropping to the ground and performing impressively fast rolls that allowed her to position herself behind her opponent. From Yui's perspective, Kula reapered again, standing in front of her and looking her right in the face. The older girl was catched by surprise by this action. The expression on Kula's face was all but friendly. I don't like you, she said with a pointed stare as a cold aura began to envelope her. Her hair began to be pushed upwards by an unseen energy. It was as if an unknown power was being manifested through her body. Her hair began to change color, from bright yellow to ice cold, and the irises of her eyes also turned of a different coloration, from baby blue to cold red. Kula was exuding a freezing aura that could easily be seen transforming the environment around her, making her look like some kind of beautiful but eerie and unnatural ice fairy. Yui was left for a moment literally frozen on her place as the aura of cold hit her in full. Kula just looked at her with a stoic expression that easily rivaled her own. Leave me alone, Kula said in a cold dead voice before she delivered a 1-inch punch right into Yui's sternum, sending the old girl flying several yards back and crashing into the floor with her breath taken out of her. The katana wielder tried to stand up again despite her pain, reeling from the intense cold she had felt when Kula had touched her, all the while being subjected by Kula's impassive stare from her lifeless red eyes. Yui was mildly disturbed by the younger girl's unnatural gaze. Yuki Onna, Yui muttered with odd and nervous superstition, believing Kula to be one of the legendary ice maidens from Japanese folklore. She raised her katana forward and assumed a combat stance. Never in my life had I thought I would one day face a Yuki Onna in combat. Your death will bring me great honor. I will need to release my entire power in order to defeat you, she stated before she began to concentrate all her energy on the connection with her sword to perform a technique that it is known as the highest level of mastery one can have with a weapon. Shinto Kourezan. Yui exclaimed as she released an impressive amount of ki that seemed to distort the senses of anyone who looked upon her, before she rushed towards Kula at the speed of the wind. The frail-looking ice user just simply cupped one of her hands in front of her and blew some air at the charging swords girl. It came as an utter surprise to see such an innocuous gesture could result in the assaulting girl be encased in a block of ice. Diamond breath. Kula then went on the offensive, sliding through the floor with her legs extended towards her opponent as the ground below her was turned to ice with her passing, she connected right into Yui's knees, breaking through her icy prison. Slider shoot. The small ice user then began to pummel at her opponent with a combination of punches and kicks before leaping towards Yui while spinning in the air like a ballerina, kicking her opponent with her extended leg on each spin and sending the older girl into the air. Raise spin. As Yui was falling back into the ground, Kula intercepted her in midair by shooting forward an ice spike from one of her hands. Critical ice. The attack pierced Yui on the left side of her abdomen, the long icicle ramming through her body and going all the way out from her back, leaving her with a gaping wound that began to stain the floor with her own blood. Despite the grave injury, the young swordswoman refused to fall, a testament to her strong will. "It will not end like this," Yui spoke as she clutched her side, blood seeping from between her fingers and a crimson stain, growing larger with each passing moment, forming on her uniform, blood beginning to escape too in a long trail from the corner of her mouth. The injured girl struggled to raise her katan with one hand once again and tried to charge at Kula one more time. The young ice user wasn't in the mood for more games, however. "I thought I told you to, leave me alone." Kula screamed as she released an impressive amount of energy from someone so young and unleashed a sudden overwhelming blizzard that ran wild through the entire field and ravaged the frozen earth. The attack was so powerful that the rest of the battles had to be briefly interrupted as the fighters were forced to find shelter from the bitter cold. Kula's opponent was simply blown away by the powerful storm. Freeze execution. When all was done, the entire construction site had been transformed from a dirty and dusty workplace into a frozen wasteland covered in snow and ice. The semi-dead body of Yui simply fell on the ground in a heap, the tonality of her skin having turned white-blue as her entire body had been riddled by many frost burns. At least the wound she received on the previous attack had closed due to the blood freezing into small scarlet crystals because of the intense cold. Kula began to calm down, whatever energy she was generating turning off, her hair following the laws of gravity once more and going back to cascade down from behind her, the color of her hair and eyes going back to normal and the eerie aura of cold that she was exuding disappearing altogether. She let out a small tired huff, which looked pretty cute coming from her. "I'm done," she declared with finality before leaving the battlefield. Pan and her followers were actually impressed by the little girl performance. Who knew someone so small could cause so much damage? There was just the matter of the cold though. "Brr, damn it, I'm freezing in here. I hope I don't catch a cold," Yuri said, complaining about the sudden drop of temperature. Her current attire was certainly not optimal to deal with the cold. "Remind me not to do anything to piss that girl off," she added. Nina, who also was having issues with the sudden low temperatures but could conceal it better, looked towards the small blonde walking towards Cheekage and taking her candy back from the younger girl. "I really don't think you're going to have much trouble to accomplish that. This child doesn't seem to be of a violent nature, so I doubt she's going to lash against you for any minor transgression unless you actively try to goad her," she said in a monotone. "Achoo," Pan sneezed, mildly inconvenienced by the sudden climate changes. "Good to know, it would be a bother if I have to carry a sweater wherever I go. Anyway, we should check the condition on Kula's opponent. Nina, it's your turn," she ordered to her underling, to speed things along. "As you wish," the heartless assassin went to comply with her orders without any complaint. She approached over the body of the fallen swords girl and began to assess her condition and take a reading of her vitals without a hint of emotion. Her wounds have stopped bleeding, but her temperature is far too low and her vitals are fa-dinned. Unless she receives immediate treatment, this girl will undoubtedly die, she stated without any pity. "Bring her over here, I'll let Giru deal with her wounds," Pan said absent-mindedly. Nina complied and carried the almost frozen to death Yui back towards their lines and set her in a space where all the beaten and broken opponents were being dropped to be looked upon by Giru. She then returned back to her spot flanking Pan. Mills Lane could do nothing more but declare the victor. Well, that was something no one really saw it coming, the winner of this match. The little girl with the ice powers. May God has mercy on any fool stupid enough to get on her bad side. Kula Diamond vs Yui Sayama. Kula Diamond wins KO. Alright, that is all for now. Now to wait another 2 weeks before I upload the next chapter. As I had said, expect them to be of smaller lengths. Not much to say right now, only that I will be busy playing my games. Didn't have time to check the orthography of this chapter, so you let me know of any misspelling so I can correct them. About K's being fashionable, that is a signature of the KOF series. Many of their characters dress nicely and look remarkably cool due to the fashionable designs the developers gave them. They're pretty pleasing to the eyes. Also why Kula was being pretty vicious. Remember, she was being indoctrinated to be an assassin for nests. Her first mission was to kill K, Whip and Maxima. They even gave her the moniker of Anti-K. Also her powers in a normal setting would be pretty deadly since she has attacks where she launches several pointy ice spikes at the enemy or unleashes heavy blizzards to freeze them to death. So don't let her looks deceive you. She may look little and cute, but she hides all the skills of a professional killer.